Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. I have been on a lot of camping trips, and most of them blur together in my memory. There is always the same mix of smoke in your clothes, the same lukewarm beer by the fire, the same sound of wind cutting through the trees at night. That is what I expected when my friends invited me to spend a weekend in the Appalachians. Nothing special, just another trip with tents, cheap hot dogs, and too many mosquito bites. We arrived late in the afternoon after driving a couple of hours into the hills. The site was a public one, not some deep backcountry ordeal, but far enough from the nearest town that the only light you could see at night was the fire and the moon. There were 3 of us. I brought my old canvas tent, my buddy brought his cooler and fishing poles, and his girlfriend packed enough snacks to keep us alive for a week. The spot itself was decent enough, a flat patch of dirt with a rusty fire pit and a wooden picnic table that had probably been there for decades. Off to the side, tucked between a cluster of trees, was the outhouse. The first thing that struck me about it was the smell. Now, I know outhouses never smell good. That is part of the deal. But this was different. It was sour and heavy. Not just waste, but something that made my throat tighten when I got too close. It clung to the air around the little shack and seemed to drift into camp with the breeze. I figured it had just not been cleaned in a long time. It was easy to ignore at first because we were busy setting up camp and joking around, but by the time night fell, I could not shake it. I remember lying in my tent after midnight, the fire reduced to glowing coals, listening to the sound of the woods settling down. There is a rhythm to it if you pay attention, the cicadas humming, the occasional branch snapping under a deer's hooves, the distant call of an owl. It usually lulls me to sleep, but that night, something else broke the pattern. It was faint, almost too faint to notice at first. A rasping sound, like someone clearing their throat. I froze, holding my breath, and it came again. A cough, just one, then silence. I told myself it was nothing, maybe an animal, maybe even one of my friends. But when I listened closer, the direction was clear. It came from the outhouse. I lay there in my sleeping bag for what felt like an hour, every nerve in my body tight, waiting for it to happen again. It never did. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, over instant coffee and burnt pancakes, I mentioned it. My friend laughed, said maybe some hiker had wandered through and stopped for a smoke break in the shack. His girlfriend frowned, though. She said she thought she heard footsteps sometime in the night, slow ones circling near the edge of camp, but she had been too tired to check. We all brushed it off, not wanting to sour the mood. Still, I could not get it out of my head. Later that day, when I went to use the outhouse, I noticed something strange. The door was shut, secured with an old padlock that looked like it had not been touched in years. I rattled it out of curiosity, and it held firm. There was no way anyone had gone inside. That unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. If the door had been locked, who had coughed? I kept that thought to myself the rest of the day. We fished at the nearby stream, played cards, and talked about old high school stories around the fire. I tried to let the normalcy of it wash away the unease. It almost worked. But that smell lingered, stronger than ever once the sun went down, carried on the night air until it seemed to hang over the entire camp. By the time I crawled into my tent again, my nerves were shot. I lay awake long after my friends were snoring, staring at the nylon ceiling, straining to hear any sound beyond the hum of insects. And when the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rot and something sour, I swore I heard it again. That cough. It was closer this time. I did not move, did not breathe. I just lay there, every muscle tense, waiting for something else. The sound of footsteps, the creak of the shack door, anything. But after that single cough, the woods went silent again. I barely slept that night. When dawn finally broke, I crawled out of the tent with dry eyes and a pounding head. The outhouse sat where it always had, gray and crooked against the trees, the padlock still hanging from the latch. My friends teased me for looking so jumpy, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The smell was worse in the morning light, sharp and unmistakable. It did not just smell like waste anymore. It smelled like something rotting, something that had been sitting too long in a place it should not be. I told myself maybe it was a dead animal. Maybe one had crawled under the shack and gotten stuck. That was easier to believe than the other thought scratching at the back of my mind. That someone was in there, someone who should not be. The second day at camp started like any other trip I had been on. The morning was cool, the sun just breaking through the trees, and the air smelled sharp with pine. But underneath all of that was that foul odor again, drifting from the outhouse. It was not just bad, it was heavy, like it had weight to it. The kind of smell that sticks to the back of your throat and makes your stomach twist. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe a raccoon had crawled under the shack and died, or maybe the whole thing was just too old and unkept. But after hearing the cough the night before, every whiff felt like proof that something was wrong. We decided to hike that morning. There was a marked trail that wound up into the hills and gave a view of the valley, and it seemed like a good way to distract myself. The trail was rough but manageable, the kind of hike that leaves you sweating but satisfied. The air felt cleaner the farther we got from camp, and for a while, I was able to let go of the unease that had settled in my chest. My buddy was cracking jokes, his girlfriend was snapping photos, and I almost convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. But when we got back in the late afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the lock on the outhouse door. It was broken. The old, rusted padlock that had hung on the latch was now snapped clean through, the pieces lying in the dirt. The door hung slightly open, swaying with each breeze. I froze at the sight, every hair on my arm standing on end. My buddy noticed too, frowning as he picked up the broken lock. "This thing was solid," he said. "No way it just broke on its own." We stood there staring at the open doorway. From where we were, the inside looked dark, shadows swallowing the little space hole. The smell was worse now, pouring out of the shack in waves. My friend muttered a curse and kicked the door open. Inside, it was not just a toilet. There were piles of things. At first, I thought it was trash. Old food wrappers, crumpled water bottles, clothing tossed in heaps. But the longer I looked, the more it became clear these were not leftovers from campers. These were lived-in piles, shirts folded neatly in some spots, blankets spread thin on the floor, a half-empty pack of crackers sitting on a wooden ledge. The walls had strange scratches along them, like someone had been clawing the wood out of boredom or desperation. And then there were the Polaroids. They were scattered across the floor and tucked into corners, dozens of them. I picked one up with shaking hands and felt my stomach drop. It was a photo of the outhouse itself, from the outside, taken at night. Another showed the fire pit at the campsite. Another, the stream where we had been fishing. Every one of them showed campers. Some looked old, the colors faded, the edges curled with time. Groups of people laughing around the fire, families standing by their tents, kids splashing in the stream. Normal snapshots of strangers who had once been here. But then I found one that froze me completely. It was me. I was standing at the edge of the stream, holding a fishing pole, my face turned just enough that the camera had caught me clearly. The photo was crisp, recent. I had worn that same shirt earlier that day. I dropped it like it burned me. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. My buddy picked it up, and his face went pale. His girlfriend covered her mouth with both hands. None of us spoke for a long moment. The silence pressed in, broken only by the faint creak of the shack in the wind. Then my friend muttered, "We should not be here." We backed out, closing the door behind us, though it hung loose on its hinges. I could not stop glancing at the tree line, half expecting someone to step out. Every shadow felt alive, every rustle in the brush made me jump. The rest of the day passed in a haze of nerves. We tried to keep busy, cooking dinner and gathering wood, but none of us could shake the feeling that we were being watched. That night, I did not even try to sleep. I sat by the dying fire, staring into the dark, every sound of the forest amplified. My friends eventually dozed off, but I sat there, clutching a flashlight like a weapon. The woods were too quiet. No owls, no crickets, no wind, just a heavy silence pressing down. At some point, I heard it again. The cough. Not faint this time, not distant. It came from the outhouse, sharp and ragged, like someone clearing their throat after a long silence. The hair on my neck stood up. I aimed the flashlight at the shack. The beam caught on the wooden door, the shadows thick around it. The smell drifted stronger, curling through the air. My stomach churned, bile rising. I did not move, did not speak, just sat there frozen until the sound faded, leaving only silence. When dawn finally came, I felt like I had aged years. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, my chest ached with tension. My buddy asked if I had heard it too, and when I nodded, his girlfriend whispered that we needed to leave. But he shook his head, said it was probably some drifter living rough, someone who had broken in to get by. He tried to sound confident, but his voice trembled. We packed faster than I have ever packed in my life. Even as we loaded the car, I could not shake the thought of that photograph. Someone had been close enough to take it without me noticing, close enough to watch us all day. As we drove away, I looked back through the trees one last time. The outhouse door was wide open now, swinging on its hinges. For a second, I thought I saw movement inside, a pale shape shifting in the dark. I blinked, and it was gone, but the smell lingered in my nose the entire drive home. By the third day, the mood of the trip had completely changed. It was no longer about hiking or fishing or sitting by the fire. Every one of us was on edge, looking over our shoulders, jumping at the smallest sounds. The woods, which had first seemed peaceful and inviting, now felt claustrophobic, like they were pressing in around us. Every tree seemed to be hiding something. Every shadow seemed alive. We had agreed the night before that we would pack up and head out that morning. It felt cowardly to leave, like we were giving up over a bad smell and some trash in an old shack, but none of us wanted to risk another night there. My buddy kept brushing it off, saying it was probably just some homeless guy squatting, but even he had stopped sounding sure of himself. His girlfriend barely spoke at all, and when she did, it was usually to remind us how quickly we could get back to the car if we moved fast. As we were breaking camp, I noticed something strange near the fire pit. There were footprints in the dirt that had not been there the night before, bare footprints. They were small, too small to belong to any of us, and they circled around the camp in an uneven pattern. My skin went cold when I realized the prints led directly to the outhouse and back again. I almost said nothing, almost kept it to myself, but the fear pushed the words out before I could stop them. My friend followed my gaze, his face tightening when he saw them too. His girlfriend swore under her breath, throwing her gear into the car with shaking hands. We got out of there quickly. The drive back down the dirt road felt endless, every turn making me expect to see someone standing in the path ahead, but nothing happened. The trees eventually opened up, the smell faded, and I almost let myself believe it was over. The problem was, it did not end when we left. I got home late that night, exhausted and trying to forget the whole thing. I dumped my pack by the door, showered, and collapsed into bed. For the first time in days, I slept deeply. But when I woke the next morning, there was something sitting on my kitchen counter that made my blood run cold. It was a Polaroid. The picture showed me asleep in my bed. The angle was wrong for it to have been taken from the doorway or the hall. It looked like it had been snapped from the corner of the room, near my dresser. I searched the apartment top to bottom, every closet, every cabinet, nothing. The locks on the doors were still in place, the windows shut. But I could not explain how the photo had gotten there. I had not taken it. No one had a key to my apartment. I told myself maybe it was a sick joke, Maybe my buddy had taken it while we were camping and left it as a prank. That idea kept me calm enough to make it through the morning, but when I texted him later, he swore he knew nothing about it. His girlfriend backed him up, saying they had found something similar at their place too, a Polaroid left on their porch, showing the two of them asleep in their tent from the first night of the trip. The three of us met up that afternoon to talk it through. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we all knew what it meant. Whoever had been living in that outhouse, they had followed us. Or maybe they had already been closer than we ever realized, watching us long before we found the shack. That night, I tried to stay awake. I sat in the living room with every light on, the television running just for the noise. Midnight came and went, then one, then two. At some point, my eyelids grew heavy, and I dozed off on the couch. When I woke up again, it was still dark, the clock reading a little past 4. The smell was there. That same heavy, sour rot from the woods, clinging to the air inside my apartment. My stomach turned as I realized it was strongest near the hallway, drifting from the direction of my bedroom. I grabbed a flashlight and moved slowly, heart pounding so hard it made my chest ache. The bedroom was empty, the window was locked, the closet held nothing but clothes. I almost convinced myself I was imagining it, that the smell was stuck in my nose from the trip. But when I turned back toward the hallway, I saw it. Another Polaroid. It was lying on the floor just outside the door, face down. I picked it up with shaking hands, flipping it over. This one showed me standing in the hallway, the same hallway I was in at that very moment. My breath caught. The angle was from behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Nothing. Empty air, quiet walls. But the smell was stronger, so strong I gagged. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the bathroom with the door locked, the shower running just to drown out the silence. My phone sat on the sink, screen lighting up every so often with notifications I ignored. I could not bring myself to move. When morning came, I felt broken, like something in me had cracked. I called my buddy and told him everything. He sounded just as wrecked. Said he had woken up to his front door standing wide open, though he swore he had locked it before bed. He found muddy footprints in his kitchen, bare prints leading straight to the fridge, before turning back toward the door. His girlfriend was so shaken she refused to stay in the apartment another night. We all agreed we had to talk to someone about it. A ranger, the police, anyone. But deep down, I knew it would not matter. How do you explain Polaroids appearing in your apartment? How do you tell someone that the smell of rot is following you from a shack in the woods? They would think we were crazy, or worse, accuse us of making it all up. That night, I tried to be braver. I left the lights off, sat in the dark with a kitchen knife clutched in my hand, waiting. Hours dragged by. My nerves screamed with every sound, every creak of the building settling, but nothing happened. No smell, no photos, no intruder. By dawn, I almost felt foolish for being so afraid. And then I saw the note. It was not a Polaroid this time, just a scrap of paper, folded neatly and placed on my kitchen table. In shaky handwriting, only 3 words were scrawled across it. I see you. After I found the note on my table, everything in my apartment felt wrong. I stood there staring at those 3 words for so long that the clock ticked through an entire hour before I finally moved. The handwriting was uneven, like someone had scratched it down in a hurry, the letters leaning awkwardly as though the hand behind them had not written much before. It was enough to make my skin crawl. I checked the locks again, every window, every latch. I even pushed furniture in front of the door, though I knew it would not stop anyone determined enough to get in. The problem was not just that someone had been inside. It was that they had been close enough to my bed to take pictures of me sleeping, close enough to leave a note while I sat awake in the next room. The idea that they could come and go without me ever hearing was almost worse than if they had broken in loudly. My buddy called later that morning. His voice sounded ragged, and he admitted he had not slept at all. He had woken up to find his refrigerator open, food scattered across the floor. On the counter was another Polaroid, this one of him brushing his teeth. He swore he had been alone in the bathroom, yet the photo showed him from an angle behind his shoulder. The part that disturbed him the most was the reflection in the mirror. A shadowy shape stood in the doorway behind him, blurred but definitely human. His girlfriend had already packed a bag and left to stay with her parents. She wanted nothing more to do with it, and I could not blame her. But that left him and me, both shaken and unsure what to do. We debated calling the police again, but what could we say? Someone left photos in our homes? Someone might have been inside but left no trace. No fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing but pictures that could easily be dismissed as pranks. I told him about the note. He went quiet for a long moment, before muttering that maybe we had made a mistake going into that outhouse at all. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried to go about things normally, even forced myself to go to the grocery store, but every aisle felt like a trap, every shopper like a threat. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing too close, watching. I caught myself sniffing the air at random moments, searching for that heavy rot. It was not there at the store, but when I carried my bags inside my apartment again, the smell hit me immediately. It was stronger now, like it had seeped into the walls. I lit candles, sprayed cleaner, even opened the windows, but nothing helped. The stink just sat there, clinging to everything. That night, I set up a camera. It was an old handheld one I used for vacations, nothing fancy, but it had a timer and could record through the night. I propped it up on a shelf in the living room, pointed toward the hallway, hoping to catch something. Maybe I thought proof would make me feel less crazy. Maybe I just needed to know I was not imagining it all. I barely slept, tossing on the couch while the camera's red light blinked in the dark. Around 3 a.m, I heard it again. The cough. This time it was not faint. It came from the hallway, clear and ragged, followed by a shuffle like bare feet dragging across the floor. My blood turned cold. I clutched the knife I had been keeping by my side, but I did not move. I could not. My body locked up, every muscle rigid. The coughing stopped, then silence. I must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing I remember was sunlight streaming in through the windows. I jolted awake and rushed to the camera, hands shaking as I scrolled through the footage. For the first hour or so, it was nothing, just me pacing, sitting, lying down. Then, around 3:17, movement. A figure stepped into the frame. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The image was grainy, the figure more of a shadow than a person. But as it moved closer to the lens, details became clearer. The man was tall and gaunt, his clothes filthy and torn. His skin looked pale, almost gray, and his hair hung in greasy strands across his face. He stared directly into the camera for a long moment, then turned his head toward the couch where I slept. My breath caught as I watched. The man walked slowly, deliberately, into the living room. He stopped beside the couch, looking down at me. For nearly 5 full minutes, he just stood there, motionless, staring. Then he bent down, so close his face almost touched mine. I flinched, even though I knew it had already happened. And then he looked back at the camera. Not just a glance. He looked directly into it, his mouth twisting into a faint, crooked grin. He reached out and pressed one finger to his lips in a shushing gesture. Then the feed cut to static. I threw up right there in the kitchen sink. When I finally calmed down enough to call my buddy, my words came out broken and jumbled. He listened without interrupting, then said he had woken to find another Polaroid on his nightstand. This one showed him and his girlfriend asleep, though she had been gone for days. She was in the bed beside him, but her face looked wrong, pale, sunken, lifeless. He said he had ripped it up immediately, too terrified to keep it. We both knew then that leaving the campsite had not ended it. If anything, it had only brought it closer. I spent the rest of the day with my curtains drawn, knife never leaving my hand. Every creak of the building made me jump. Every sound from the street made me flinch. I checked the footage again and again, hoping I had imagined it, but the recording was always the same. The man, standing over me, the grin, the shushing finger. That night, I did not even try to sleep. When the clock ticked past 3, I sat frozen on the couch, waiting. The smell grew stronger, seeping from the hallway, curling into the living room like smoke. I stared into the dark until my eyes burned, but I could not see anything there. The silence pressed in, heavier with every second, and then came the scratching. Soft at first, like fingernails dragging across wood. It came from the hall closet, slow and deliberate, back and forth, back and forth. My throat tightened. I raised the knife, every nerve screaming at me to move, but my legs felt like lead. The scratching grew louder. Finally, I snapped. I lunged forward, yanked the closet door open, and shone my flashlight inside. Nothing. Just coats and shoes and boxes. But on the inside of the door, etched deep into the wood, were words scratched in shaky letters. I am here. I did not sleep at all after finding those words scratched into the closet door. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined a hand moving slowly in the dark, dragging nails across wood to carve that message. I kept replaying the footage from the night before, the way he had looked into the camera, how deliberate it was. This was not just someone hiding out and messing with us. He wanted us to know. He wanted me to feel him there. By morning, I felt like a ghost myself, pale, shaking, running on fumes. I called my buddy again, and the first thing he said was that he was packing his things. He did not want to stay in his place another night. His girlfriend still would not come back, and now he was convinced the thing, whatever it was, had been standing right over him while he slept again. He said he had woken to the sound of someone breathing in his ear, but when he bolted upright, the room was empty. I asked if he had checked for more Polaroids. He paused, and that silence told me everything. He had found one. He just did not want to say what was on it. The two of us met later that day at a diner just off the highway. Neither of us had much of an appetite, just coffee cooling in our cups while we sat there, trying to figure out what to do. We agreed that calling the cops again was useless. What were we supposed to say? That a man who might not even exist was leaving us photos of ourselves in our homes? That he smelled like rot and left no evidence behind? It would sound insane. We tossed around the idea of leaving town, just getting in the car and driving until the tank was empty, starting fresh somewhere else. But even saying it out loud felt hollow. How do you run from something that is already inside your walls, already watching you while you sleep? It did not matter where we went. When I got back to my apartment that evening, I almost turned around and left again. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the door. It was suffocating now, thick and sour, like meat left in the sun for weeks. I gagged into my sleeve, tears stinging my eyes. The whole place felt poisoned. I opened the windows, turned on fans, tried everything to clear the air. Nothing worked. The smell was not fading anymore. It was rooted there, like the walls had soaked it in. By nightfall, I was running on nothing but nerves. I set the camera up again, this time pointing directly at my bed. I wanted to know for certain. I wanted proof, even if it killed me to see it. I lay awake for hours, staring into the dark, knife under my pillow, every sense straining. Around 3 again, it started. The scratching, but this time it was not from the closet. It came from under the bed. My heart stopped. The sound was slow, steady, deliberate, like fingers dragging across the floorboards. I could feel the mattress shift, just slightly, as though something pressed against it from below. I wanted to run, but I could not move. I lay there frozen, staring at the ceiling, convinced that if I looked over the side of the bed, I would see a face staring back. The scratching stopped. Silence filled the room so thick I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Then the mattress dipped near my feet, just a fraction, as though someone had placed their hand there. My throat closed. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. At some point, exhaustion must have pulled me under, because I woke to sunlight burning through the blinds. The camera was still running, the battery almost dead. My hands shook as I replayed the footage. Around 3:17, the screen flickered. A shape crawled out from under the bed. It was him. The same gaunt figure, pale skin, greasy hair, moving on hands and knees like an animal. He climbed out slowly, limbs bending in ways that made my stomach twist. He stood beside the bed, watching me. Then he leaned closer, so close the lens caught every detail of his face, the hollow eyes, the cracked lips, the faint trace of a smile. And then, in the faintest rasp, I heard him say it again. "I am here." I slammed the laptop shut and nearly threw up. My whole body shook, adrenaline flooding me until I thought my heart would burst. That was when I decided I could not stay another night. I grabbed a bag, stuffed in clothes, my wallet, whatever I could reach. I left everything else behind. I drove to my parents' place 3 hours away, barely stopping for gas. For a moment it felt like a relief. Their house was familiar, safe. I sat with my mom in the kitchen, forcing a smile, pretending everything was fine. But then she wrinkled her nose and asked if something in my bag had spoiled. The smell had followed me. That night, I set up the camera again, this time in the guest room at their house. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, until I must have passed out from sheer exhaustion. In the morning, I checked the footage. At 3:17, the door to the guest room opened slowly. He stepped inside. Not rushed, not frantic. Calm, patient. He stood in the doorway for a long time before walking to the foot of the bed. His pale hand rested lightly on the blanket near my ankle. Then he crouched down, face tilted up toward the camera, and smiled. But the worst part was not that he had followed me. The worst part was the shape behind him. In the faint corner of the screen, half hidden in the doorway, another figure was standing. Taller, broader, with the same stillness, the same unnatural calm. My breath caught. My mind raced back to what my buddy had said. The thing he had not wanted to describe in his Polaroid. The way he had gone quiet. This was not just one man. We had not been dealing with a lone squatter. We had stumbled onto something bigger. I wish I could say I packed my things and left the country, or that I found some expert who had answers. But the truth is simpler and more pathetic. I froze. For days after seeing that second figure in the doorway, I could barely move. My parents went about their usual routines, asking me small questions about work or if I had been eating well, and I nodded and smiled and lied through my teeth while my insides twisted with fear. Every time I excused myself to the guest room, I double-checked the curtains, the closet, the locks. But none of it mattered. The footage was proof. They could get in anywhere, and they did not care that I knew. I kept thinking back to the campsite, to the smell around the outhouse, the coughing, the Polaroids. It seemed almost laughable now that I had thought it was just some disturbed person squatting. That was the most comfortable explanation, the one I had clung to until it split apart. Now I knew there was more than one of them, and they were not confined to a campsite in the woods. They had walked into my home, stood over me while I slept, followed me across the state, and had no trouble showing up under my parents' roof. The smell followed everywhere. That was one of the worst parts. I could see my mother wrinkle her nose as she walked past my door. She asked if something had spilled in my bag, but I told her no, and left it at that. How do you explain that the rot is not in your clothes, not in the walls, but in the air itself, tied to something you cannot name? At night, it was unbearable. It seeped into my dreams until I woke gagging, eyes watering, sure that if I turned my head, I would see them crouched beside me. I told my buddy what I had seen in the footage. He went quiet for a long time, and then finally admitted he had been seeing more than one for weeks. He had hoped it was just paranoia, shadows playing tricks. But he had found Polaroids in his apartment showing 2 figures, sometimes 3. Always blurry, always just at the edge of the frame, but real enough to make his skin crawl. When he said that, something inside me broke. I realized there was no end to it. We had stumbled into something we were never supposed to see. and now it had marked us. Whether it was people or something less human, it did not matter. They were watching. They had been living under floors and inside walls, and the outhouse was only one of their many hiding spots. I stayed another 2 nights at my parents' place before I left. I could not risk them. The second morning, my mother found a Polaroid slid under the back door. It was a photo of the 3 of us eating dinner at the table the night before. My father laughed it off, said maybe one of my old friends was playing a prank, but I saw his hand shake as he set the picture down. I knew then I had to go. I drove without a plan, just kept heading west until the tank ran out. I bought a cheap motel room and stayed there, curtains drawn, knife on the nightstand. I set up the camera again, though part of me already knew what it would show. The footage started the same way it always did. Empty room, nothing moving but me shifting under the blanket. Then, just after 3 in the morning, the door opened. He stepped in first, the thin one with greasy hair and gray skin, then another figure, taller, broader, followed behind him, and then another. 3 of them stood in the room. They did not move at first. They just stood there watching me sleep. Then one bent down and placed something on the floor beside the bed. In the faint light, I saw it was a Polaroid. After a long while, they turned toward the camera. All 3 leaned close, faces pressed together, eyes locked on the lens. Then the screen went black. When I woke in the morning, the photo was there on the carpet, just as the video showed. It was a picture of me lying in bed with 3 shadows surrounding me. But in this version, my eyes were open, wide and staring straight into the camera. I stopped recording after that. I stopped talking to my buddy too. He kept calling, but I could not answer. I did not want to hear him describe more Polaroids, more faces. It was bad enough knowing what I knew. Hearing him confirm it would only drive it deeper into my bones. I do not bother pretending to live normally anymore. I keep moving, never staying more than a week in one place. Sometimes I wake to the smell in a new room before I have even unpacked. Sometimes I find Polaroids waiting for me when I check in. The staff will swear they did not leave anything, but the pictures are always there. The worst is the silence. They do not speak much, only that rasp I heard the first night. Sometimes, though, when I am right on the edge of sleep, I hear whispering. It is never clear, never words I can make out, but it fills the room like a tide. I lie there with my eyes shut, pretending not to notice, too afraid to move. Because if I move, I know they will know I am awake. I think back to the outhouse sometimes, how stupid it was to force the door, to look inside, to treat it like some creepy adventure. I remember the smell, the cough, the Polaroids scattered across the floor. We could have left right then. We should have. But we lingered. We looked too long, and that was all it took. I do not know how long I can keep this up. I am not writing this to get advice or sympathy. I know there is nothing anyone can do. I am only writing it down because part of me needs someone else to carry the weight of knowing, even for a moment. Maybe then I will not feel so alone. But the truth is, I am never alone, not anymore. Even now, as I type this, I can smell it thick in the air, that rotten, heavy stench pressing against my lungs, and I can hear it too, faint scratching just under the bed. I have not looked yet. I am afraid if I do, I will see more than one pair of eyes staring back. I do not know how this ends. I do not know if it ever will, but I am tired. And I am scared, and I cannot shake the thought that this is not just about me or my friend, that there are more outhouses, more closets, more hidden spaces where they wait for someone curious enough to look inside. And if you ever smell something foul where it should not be, if you ever hear coughing in a place that is supposed to be empty, do not open the door, do not go inside, because once you do, they never leave. This was supposed to be one of those solo resets, the kind where you disappear into the woods for a few days and come back clear-headed, full of fresh air and tired legs. I had been working too much, sleeping too little, and everything in my life had started to feel like white noise. I needed to unplug. So I packed light, just the basics: tent, food, thermal gear, water purifier. I found a trailhead up in Vermont, just a little ways past where the seasonal traffic usually dies off. Not fully backcountry, but not exactly a family-friendly loop either. A lot of locals know about it, but it is not a tourist hotspot. That was the appeal. I arrived just before noon and hiked in for a few hours. Nothing too serious. The trail was damp from recent rain, but not muddy. I picked a campsite not far from a small stream, tucked between some spruce trees. It felt private, but not claustrophobic. I set up the tent, unpacked, and cooked a small dinner over the camp stove. The usual stuff. It felt good. I even remember thinking that it was too quiet, not in a creepy way, just in the sense that I had forgotten how much noise the world makes until it all stops. There were no cars, no phones, no humming appliances, just the wind and the trees and the occasional bird making itself known. I went to sleep around 10. It was cold enough to bundle up, but not freezing. I had the rain fly on and my pack zipped up inside the tent with me. I must have dozed off fast because I do not remember tossing or turning. Then I woke up. It was still dark. I did not check the time, but it felt like deep night, the kind where everything is still, except it wasn't. I heard something outside the tent. At first, it sounded like footsteps, very light ones, soft crunching in the leaves. My first thought was deer, maybe raccoons. Animals wander through campsites all the time, especially if they smell food. But then I heard laughter. Quiet, hushed, like someone trying not to be heard and not succeeding. It sounded like kids. That threw me. I was deep enough in the woods that no one would be camping nearby without me knowing. I would have seen another tent. I would have heard voices earlier. This wasn't the kind of area people just stumbled into. I sat up slowly and held my breath. The laughter stopped, and then, clear as anything, I heard a voice. A child's voice. It said, "No, wait, that's," and then it said my name. Not kind of like my name, not close. It said it exactly. First name, pronounced right. I froze. Not out of some dramatic fear, just completely locked up, like my brain couldn't decide what to do. I didn't even reach for anything. I just sat there in the dark, listening. I didn't hear anything after that. No more laughter, no footsteps, no whispers. Eventually, I must have passed out again. I don't remember lying down. I just remember blinking, and suddenly it was light outside. The sun was up. Birds were making noise again. Everything felt normal, but my chest was tight and my back hurt from the way I had slept, curled up and stiff. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, already trying to convince myself I had dreamed the whole thing. Maybe I had woken up halfway from a nightmare and my brain filled in the rest. Then I saw the handprints. There were dozens of them, small, clearly from children, pressed into the soft dirt around the tent, all sides, some overlapping, some right near the entrance flap. They were not adult hands. I could tell by the spacing and the length of the fingers, too small, too round. I stared at them for a long time, not touching anything. just counting them and trying to figure out how they got there. That is when I noticed the photograph. It was sitting just inside the edge of the tent flap, like it had been slid there carefully. A Polaroid. In the photo, I was asleep in my sleeping bag, head turned to the side, completely unaware. And behind me, standing in the tent's opening, were 4 children. They looked maybe 8 to 10 years old, 2 boys, 2 girls, all pale, all wearing plain clothes, nothing weird or old-fashioned, just normal, except their expressions were off. Not smiling, not scowling, just watching. Their eyes were locked on me in the photo, not on the camera, on me. And the worst part was that the photo wasn't blurry. It wasn't grainy. It was perfectly framed, perfect lighting, like whoever took it knew exactly what they were doing, like it was staged. I sat down hard and just stared at the picture. There was no message, no mark, just the image and the handprints and the cold morning air around me. I packed up not long after that. I didn't eat. I didn't even boil water. I just shoved everything back into my pack, folded the tent with shaking hands, and got the hell out. I checked the trail 100 times on the way back, listening for movement, for voices. I didn't see anyone, not a single person the whole hike out. When I reached the lot, mine was still the only car there. That's when I knew this wasn't a prank, not some local kid sneaking around. It was something else, something that made no noise when it left, something that knew my name and knew when I was asleep. I have no explanation for it. I didn't tell anyone for a long time. I still don't talk about it in person, but I kept the Polaroid. It's in a drawer in my house, wrapped in an old towel so I don't have to look at it. But sometimes I still do. And every time those 4 faces are still watching. I kept telling myself not to overreact. That was the phrase I kept coming back to. Do not overreact. Even as I stood there holding that Polaroid and staring down at all those little handprints in the dirt, I kept hearing that voice in my head like some kind of loop. You're tired. You imagined the voice. You dreamed the laugh. The photo is weird, sure, but maybe it's a leftover from someone else's prank or art project or something. But I knew better. I have been camping alone enough times to know what the woods sound like, what normal wildlife does, what it feels like to wake up from a dream versus waking up to something outside your tent. And this wasn't a dream. I was awake. I felt the air change. I remember the way the laughter stopped the second I moved. I didn't go straight home after I hiked out. I drove for about 20 minutes until I found a gas station with a half-lit sign and a coffee machine that tasted like melted plastic. I sat in the car for a while with the Polaroid in my lap, just looking at it again. It hadn't changed. It didn't fade or warp like maybe I hoped it would. It was still clear, still perfectly composed, still showing those 4 kids behind me while I slept. I didn't know what to do with it. I thought about throwing it out, but I couldn't. Not because I wanted it, but because I needed it. Like some small part of me already knew that this was going to sit with me for a long time, that this was proof of something I couldn't explain. And if I got rid of it, I might start convincing myself it never happened. I put it in my glove compartment and didn't look at it again that day. When I got home, I didn't unpack right away. I brought everything inside but left the bag by the door. I just stood in the kitchen for a while, staring out the window above the sink, waiting for my brain to catch up with my body. It didn't. I felt like I was watching someone else's hands turn on the tap and rinse the coffee thermos, like I was floating just a few feet behind myself. That night, I locked every door and window. Not just the usual quick check, I double-checked them, touched the frames, tugged on the handles, pulled the curtains shut, and put a chair under the knob of the front door. I don't know what I thought that would accomplish. Maybe nothing. Maybe it just made me feel like I had control over something. I didn't sleep. I stayed up watching nothing videos, cooking tutorials, animal clips, a guy restoring old tools, anything that didn't involve people or forests or stories. I just needed noise. Something to crowd out my thoughts. But around 3 in the morning, something caught my attention. It was my phone. It had been sitting face down on the coffee table all night. I hadn't touched it, but now it was lit up, a notification from my photo app. I don't remember giving it permission to send alerts, but there it was. The message said, "New memory available, 1 year ago today." I opened it without thinking, still in that half-numb state where you just react without asking why. It was a picture of me on a different hike. Same time last year, I was standing at the edge of a lake, backpack on, squinting into the sun. I remember that day. It had rained early and cleared up in the afternoon. The trail had been muddy, and my boots had weighed a ton by the time I got back to the car. But I noticed something this time that I hadn't seen before. There were figures in the tree line. They were barely visible, blurry, but now that I knew what to look for, I couldn't unsee them. 4 shapes, standing close together in the shade. No movement, no faces, just outlines. Too small to be adults. I felt my stomach drop. I zoomed in until the picture blurred into pixels, but the shapes were still there. 4 kids, at a distance, watching. The photo app said it was taken at 3:27 in the afternoon. I would have been alone out there. No one else had been parked at the trailhead that day. I remember checking. I always check. I like knowing when I'm really alone. I didn't sleep after that either. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in one hand and the Polaroid in the other, flipping between them, comparing, matching the spacing, the general height, the way they grouped themselves. It wasn't identical, but it was close enough that my brain filled in the rest. I started wondering if this wasn't the first time I had seen them. Maybe it was just the first time I noticed. The next morning I checked my car. I don't even know what I was looking for. Fingerprints maybe, scratches, dirt, anything out of place, but everything looked normal. I popped the trunk. Nothing. Opened the glove compartment. The Polaroid was still there, untouched. I stared at it again. Their clothes were still hard to place. Not modern, but not obviously old either. Just plain, like the kind of things kids wear in photos where the parents pick everything out. No logos. No prints, just solid colors. One of the boys had a red shirt, the other had blue. The girl in the middle had a white dress, and the other girl wore something darker, maybe gray. No shoes. That part I hadn't noticed the first time. None of them had shoes on. I stayed inside the rest of that day, and the next, I told work I had a cold, which wasn't really a lie. I felt sick, but not in a physical way, just off. Like I had stepped out of rhythm with the rest of the world and couldn't get back into sync. I kept the windows covered. I stopped opening the blinds. And every time I walked past the mirror, I found myself looking over my shoulder, because somewhere in the back of my mind, a question had started to form. What if they didn't follow me out of the woods? What if they were already here? By the third day, I realized I hadn't really spoken to anyone. Not out loud, not even over text. I'd gone quiet without noticing, like something in me had shut a door and decided not to answer if anyone knocked. I was still eating, still drinking water, still going through the motions of being fine, but I wasn't leaving the house, not even to check the mail. I started watching the footage from my doorbell camera, not because I expected to find anything, but because it gave me something to do. It runs on motion detection, and I keep the clips saved for a week before they delete. I hadn't reviewed them since before my trip. That night, I sat down and pulled up the history, more out of curiosity than anything. Most of it was nothing. The usual: cars passing, squirrels triggering the sensor, a delivery guy dropping off a package I had forgotten I ordered. But then, buried between two daylight clips, was one from just after 3 in the morning, time-stamped the day I got back. The clip was short, about 20 seconds. It was triggered by motion on the porch. At first there was nothing, just the empty frame and the soft glow from the street lamp. Then, just before the clip ended, someone stepped into view. A child. Only the lower half of their body was visible. The rest was cut off by the top of the frame. They stood still for maybe 3 seconds, not moving, not knocking, not trying the door, just standing. Then they stepped backward and disappeared. I watched it 6 times. I couldn't make out their face, couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl. Just bare feet, shorts, a t-shirt, and stillness. The worst part was how close they had to be for the camera to trigger. It has a short range. They would have had to walk right up to the door for it to record anything. Which means they were there, standing inches from where I was sleeping, without making a sound. That was the first time I felt scared in a way I couldn't rationalize. Before that, I could still pretend there was a logical explanation, that maybe someone was playing a prank, that the Polaroid had some other story behind it. But now someone had come to my house, not during the day, not as a joke. In the middle of the night, they stood right outside my door and did nothing. That kind of silence is not a prank. It is a message. I downloaded the clip, saved it on 2 drives, and emailed a copy to myself. I wanted it backed up somewhere, just in case. I called the non-emergency police line later that day and told them I had footage of a possible prowler. I left out the part about the forest. I just said someone had come to my porch late at night and that I felt unsafe. The officer who took my call was polite, but it was clear he had heard this kind of thing 100 times. He said they would make a note of it and told me to call back if anything else happened. That was it. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I sat in the living room with all the lights off, watching the front door through the window blinds. I held a flashlight in one hand and a metal baseball bat in the other. I'm not a violent person. I've never even been in a fight, but something about that silence had changed the way I thought. I didn't want answers anymore. I just didn't want them coming back. But they didn't. Not that night. The next day, I bought a new camera, one of those trail cams that hunters use. Infrared, battery-powered, no Wi-Fi. I set it up outside, angled toward the side yard. I also started leaving a light on in the front room, thinking maybe the visibility would make whoever it was think twice about coming back. That night, I slept on the couch again. In the morning, I checked the camera. It had captured motion. The timestamp was 2:17 in the morning. The clip was short, just a few seconds, but it was enough. The camera had picked up 3 children walking along the side of the house, barefoot, silent, no clear faces, just outlines. The same height range as the ones in the Polaroid. They didn't stop. They didn't turn toward the lens. They just moved along the fence line and disappeared behind the trees at the edge of the yard. The weirdest part was how they moved. Not slow, not fast, just in sync, like they were used to walking in formation, like they had practiced it. I stared at the footage for a long time before I turned it off. I didn't know what to do with it anymore. Calling the police again felt pointless. They would ask the same questions. Did they knock? Did they try to get inside? Was anything damaged? No, none of that. They just came and went like shadows. That day, I stayed inside again. I pulled the shades on every window and started looking through old photos on my phone. Not the ones from the trip, not the obvious stuff. I looked at random ones. From holidays, from weekend hikes, from walks in the park, anything with trees in the background. And I started noticing things. Shapes. Not in every photo, not even most, but enough. Blurry spots where someone might have been. Patterns in the leaves that didn't match the branches. The edge of a hand in the corner of a frame. A reflection in the water that did not belong to me. I don't know what that means. I don't know if they have been following me for longer than I thought, or if I was just unlucky enough to see behind a curtain I wasn't meant to notice. But the more I looked, the more I started to believe this didn't start in Vermont. It started long before that. I just didn't know I was part of it yet. It is hard to explain how quickly normal stops feeling normal. You think it takes a big event, something dramatic or violent or obvious, but it does not. It takes just enough small, quiet moments that stack up in the back of your mind until the entire shape of your day feels wrong, and you are left wondering when your own life started feeling unfamiliar. By the end of that week, I had stopped opening the blinds during the day. I stopped checking the door when a package got dropped off. I muted my phone more often than I answered it. I wasn't hiding exactly, but I wasn't engaging with the world either, not fully. The footage from the trail cam had done something to me. Seeing those kids again, walking along my fence like they knew the route, like they belonged there, shifted something in the way I saw everything. Because it meant this wasn't just about the woods, it meant they had found me, that they had chosen not just to follow, but to let me know they had followed. I started thinking about the photo again, the Polaroid. I had moved it from the glove compartment to a drawer in the hallway. It was wrapped in a towel, tucked under a flashlight and some matches. Every few days I would take it out and look at it again just to see if it had changed somehow. It never had. Still me, asleep in my tent. Still those 4 kids standing behind me, staring down at my body like I was a display. I had not noticed this before. But in the corner of the photo, just near the tent zipper, was a small detail I had missed. A hand reaching in. Not one of the children's hands, not small like theirs. This one looked longer, older. I checked the photo at least 10 times, tracing the shape of it. It was not obvious unless you knew to look, but it was there. A pale hand holding the flap of the tent open just enough to take the picture. Someone else had been there. Someone behind the camera. I felt something go tight in my throat, like a line being pulled. Until that moment, I had been telling myself that maybe the kids were playing some kind of game, that they were just watching, just observing. But now I saw it differently. If someone else had taken the picture, then these kids were not alone. Someone was directing them, or leading them, or worse, using them. That night I slept with the lights on. I went back to the trail cam the next morning and moved it. I placed it lower, facing toward the opposite side of the yard. I added a second one, tucked under the stairs by the back door. I also bought one of those small battery-powered alarms that chime when they detect motion, and stuck it near the kitchen window. None of it made me feel safe, but it gave me a structure. A way to feel like I was responding instead of just waiting. 2 nights later, the alarm went off. It was subtle, just a soft chime that repeated twice. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard it. At first I thought it was a dream, but when I sat up and listened, I knew it was real. I grabbed the flashlight and checked the window. No one was there. I checked the back door, still locked. The trail cams were still running. When I pulled the memory card from the camera by the stairs, I felt my hands shaking a little. I waited until morning to check the footage. I wanted daylight. I wanted birds chirping and the sound of garbage trucks passing before I opened that file. The clip started slow, shadows, movement just at the edge of the frame. Then one of them stepped into full view. A child, same height, same bare feet. This time they were facing the camera. I paused the video. Their eyes were wide, not scared, not curious, just wide, like they had been that way too long. Their mouth was slightly open, but not like they were breathing, just hanging open. Like the face was stuck that way. Their skin looked too pale under the camera light, almost reflective, like they were made of something thinner than skin should be. I played the rest of the clip. The child didn't move much, just stood there staring directly into the lens. After a few seconds, they stepped backward and disappeared into the dark. I watched it again and again, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the lighting, that the face was just weird because of the angle. But it wasn't. The stillness was too deliberate. The look in those eyes was too specific, like they knew I would see this later, like the camera was part of their plan. After that, I stopped watching the cameras for a while. I still let them record, but I couldn't keep checking them. It felt like they were showing me something I already knew, and seeing it again was only making it worse. That was when I remembered the lake photo. The one from a year ago that had those blurred shapes in the woods. I pulled it up on my phone again, zoomed all the way in, and stared at those figures. I started wondering how many other places they had followed me to, how many times they had been close enough to be in the background, but just far enough not to be noticed. I went through all my cloud storage. Every photo I had taken over the past 2 years, I started marking the ones where something looked off. a shadow where it shouldn't be, a pair of footprints by the edge of the frame, the corner of a shirt disappearing behind a tree. There were more than I expected. And then something occurred to me that I hadn't thought about until that moment. If these kids were always just barely out of frame, then maybe I was not the one being watched. Maybe I was the one being followed. Not because of who I was, but because I was easy to reach, alone, isolated. And maybe I had already been chosen. The idea that I had been chosen sat with me in a strange way, not like a lightning strike, not some big realization, just quiet, low in my chest, like a weight that had been there a while, and I had only just noticed it. And once it was there, it started to shape everything I did. I stopped looking for answers, not because I did not want them. I just realized that no one was going to give them to me. This was not a situation where you filed a report or told the right person and it got fixed. Whatever was happening, it had been happening long before I noticed. And now I was part of it. I started thinking about patterns, about what these kids were actually doing. They were not breaking in, not leaving threats. They had not spoken to me since that night in the woods when one of them said my name. They were not trying to hurt me, at least not directly. They were showing up, again and again, and letting me know they were there. I remembered something from a documentary I had watched years ago. It was about predators, not people, animals, wolves, how they stalked their prey for long stretches before making a move. Not just for hunting, but to study, to learn behaviors, to find weaknesses. I remember the voice in the documentary saying that wolves sometimes walked alongside their prey at a distance, waiting until the moment was right. I started wondering if that was what the kids were doing. Not haunting me, just circling, waiting. That week, I finally left the house. I needed to know if it would follow me somewhere new. I took my laptop and booked a motel a couple towns over. Nothing fancy. Just a small, two-story place near a highway off-ramp. I paid cash. Did not tell anyone where I was going. When I checked in, the front desk clerk barely looked at me. I asked for a room near the back. Something quiet. He gave me a key and went back to his crossword. I spent the first night watching TV with the sound off, just lights moving across the screen. I had one of the trail cams with me, and I set it up outside the window, pointing toward the parking lot. It felt like overkill, but it also felt necessary. Nothing happened that night. No sounds. No alarm. No movement. The next morning, I checked the footage. The only thing it caught was a stray cat crossing the lot around midnight. I almost felt relief. Almost. I stayed 2 more nights. Still nothing. I started thinking maybe I had shaken them. Maybe they did not know where I was. Or maybe they were never following me at all. Maybe they were tied to that house. That forest. That moment. On the 4th day, I drove home. The house looked untouched. The lights were off, the blinds still closed. I stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside, like I was waiting for something to feel wrong. But everything looked the way I left it. I checked the trail cams. The memory card on the side yard camera had 2 new clips. Both were short. The first was just static. That was not normal. The camera should have either caught motion or stayed off, but this one had 20 seconds of fuzz, no clear images, no sound. The second clip showed one of the kids standing in the far corner of the yard, near the edge of the fence. Their face was turned away, looking out into the trees. After a few seconds, they turned their heads slowly toward the camera. They were holding something. It took me a minute to figure out what it was. A folded piece of paper, the kind that comes from a notebook, torn on one edge. The child bent down, set it on the ground, and walked away. I went out to check the spot in the yard. The paper was still there. It had not rained. The ground was dry. The page was a little crumpled, but readable. There were 5 words written in pencil. "Do you remember the others?" No punctuation, no signature. I read it 5 times. My throat went dry. My fingers felt numb just holding it. I did not know what it meant, but the way it was written made it sound like it was not the first time this had happened, like there had been others before me, maybe people who had seen the same things. Heard the same laugh outside a tent, woken up to the same Polaroid, maybe people who never said anything, or people who said too much. I started thinking about all the unexplained disappearances I had read about over the years, the hikers that went missing on well-marked trails, the campers whose sites were found fully intact, just abandoned, tents still standing, fires still smoldering, no signs of a struggle. And I started wondering how many of those stories involved kids. How many of those people saw something familiar in the trees? A small face, a child's voice, just enough to let their guard down. And maybe that was the point. I burned the note later that night. I watched the flames eat through the paper until there was nothing left but ash. It felt like the right thing to do, even if it did not change anything. I thought about deleting the camera footage too, about wiping everything, but I did not. Not yet. Instead, I made a new folder on my laptop. I titled it "The Others," and I started writing everything down, every detail I could remember, not just from that week, but from before, from the trip, from the photos, from every moment that felt just a little off. Every shape in the background, every noise that didn't fit. I was not trying to solve it. I just wanted a record. Because if there really were others, someone had to leave something behind. The folder kept growing. Every day I added something new, a sentence, a photo, a note about what time the cameras recorded motion, even if it was just a squirrel or a falling leaf. I stopped trying to understand the logic of it. I just recorded, like a ritual, like if I kept track of everything, it couldn't catch me off guard again. I didn't see the kids for a while after that last note, the one that asked if I remembered the others. No more recordings. No handprints, no signs of anything new. Weeks passed. The air turned colder. Leaves started falling. And I started feeling like maybe it had finally stopped. It's strange how fast your mind tries to return to normal, even when everything feels wrong, even when you've seen things that make no sense. Your brain still pulls you toward routine. It wants a shape, a reason, a place to file everything. I started going out again, small errands, late night walks around the block. I went to the grocery store during slow hours, tried to avoid looking at the woods behind the parking lot. I answered a few texts, made a phone call, laughed once at something dumb a friend sent me. It was weak, but it was real. I thought maybe I was healing. Then, one morning, I found the second Polaroid. It was slid under my front door just like the first. No envelope, no message, just the photo. I felt it before I saw it. I had walked past the door and noticed the smallest slip of white on the floor. The air shifted when I bent down to pick it up. This time I wasn't asleep in the picture. I was standing in my hallway in pajamas, one hand halfway to my face, like I had been rubbing my eyes. It was taken from outside the window through the glass. The angle was perfect. My expression was blank, not scared, just tired, vulnerable. And behind me, closer than I thought, were the same 4 kids. In the reflection, they were not in the hallway, but they were in the photo, standing just outside the frame behind the glass. Their faces were the same as before, expressionless, unblinking. That photo was the final piece. I didn't panic. I didn't call anyone. I just sat down at the table and placed the new photo beside the old one. I stared at them both, first asleep, then awake. They wanted me to see them. That was the point, all along. Not to take me, not to chase me, but to make sure I knew they were there, that they always had been, that they always would be. And for the first time, I understood what they had been trying to show me. It wasn't about me being special. It wasn't about punishment. It was an invitation, an offer. I don't think I was the first person to receive it. I don't think I'll be the last. But I was given the chance to see behind the curtain, and that alone was enough to change me. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I packed a bag. Not out of fear, but out of something else, something closer to peace. I brought the photos, a flashlight, the camera, a fresh notebook. Then I drove back to the trailhead, the same one. The parking lot was empty, like it had been before. The trees looked taller than I remembered, the path thinner. I hiked in about 6 miles, same spot, same clearing. I stood there for a long time listening. Nothing moved. Then, just as the sun started to dip below the tree line, I saw them. At the edge of the clearing, not hiding, just standing, watching. 4 kids. Same height, same eyes. But they were not alone. This time, there were others, adults, older faces, further back in the trees, silent. Some of them were smiling. It was not warm. It was not cold. It was just calm, like being welcomed home. I sat down on the ground and took out my notebook. I didn't run. I didn't speak. I just started writing what I saw, what I felt, what I had come to understand. Not everything out there wants to harm you. Some things just want to be remembered, to be believed in, to be followed. And maybe that's all this was. A signal, a question, a choice. I do not know where they come from. I do not know how they know your name, but I know they do not pick people at random. They choose you because they see something in you, something that is missing, something that belongs with them. And if you listen closely, if you stop fighting the silence, you might start to understand what they are asking. Not why, not how. Just, are you ready? I was. I am. And so I stayed until nightfall. And when I finally stood up and looked back toward the trail, I knew the way would still be there. But I also knew I would not be taking it. Because the question is not whether they will come back. The question is whether you will answer. And I did. I finally did. I never thought anything about hunting would shake me like this. My uncle had been taking me into the woods since I was a kid, teaching me how to sit still, how to listen, how to read the ground for signs of deer or turkey. We had gone out in the cold, in the rain, even in the dark before dawn, and none of that had ever really scared me. It was just the woods, familiar, predictable, quiet in a way that made you feel like the rest of the world did not matter for a while. That trip in Kentucky changed all of that. It started like any other. He had a cousin with land that stretched for miles, thick with trees and not a neighbor in sight. We drove up with rifles in the truck, a cooler of food, and the kind of excitement that comes from knowing you will not see another soul for days. The cabin we stayed in was bare bones, just enough to keep us dry and out of the wind. The roof leaked a little, and the wood stove smoked if you did not open the flue just right, but I always liked it. It felt like stepping back in time. That first evening, after we had set out some salt blocks and checked the tree stands, we sat on the porch with a couple of beers and watched the sun drop behind the ridgeline. The air smelled like pine and damp earth, sharp and clean. My uncle was telling a story about a buck he had missed when I noticed something strange. Off in the distance, deep in the trees, there was a glow. At first I thought it was just the last of the sunset catching through the branches, but as the sky went darker, the glow did not fade. It grew sharper, more defined, until I realized it was red. I nudged him and pointed. He squinted for a long time and finally muttered, "Hell is that?" From where we were, it looked like the outline of a cabin, not just a lantern in a window, not a campfire either. The whole shape of it glowed faintly, like the light was coming from inside and spilling out through every crack. It looked wrong. Too bright for a lantern, too steady for fire. My first thought was emergency lights, like maybe someone had gotten lost or hurt and set something up to be seen. But there were no roads back there, no trails even. It was all thick woods and ridges that you would have to bushwhack through. We sat there staring for longer than I realized, neither of us saying much. Finally, he shrugged like it was not our problem and went inside to stoke the stove. I tried to follow his lead, but even as I lay in my bunk later, the glow burned in my head. I felt like I could still see it when I closed my eyes, that strange, steady red in the middle of nowhere. The night air carried every little sound into the cabin. Normally it was just owls or the wind through the trees, but that night there was something else. At first it was faint enough that I thought I was imagining it. A low hum that seemed to rise and fall in rhythm. I told myself it was the wind moving strange, or some animal call I had not heard before, but the longer I listened, the more it sounded like voices. Many voices, moving together, chanting. I sat up in my bunk, straining to hear. My uncle was snoring in the other bed, completely out. I held my breath, waiting, and then I caught it again. Definitely voices, faint but steady, carrying through the trees, and underneath it, something else, a smell. The cabin had its own mix of scents, wood smoke, damp clothes, old pine boards, but this cut through it sharp and acrid, smoke, but not from our stove. It had a bitter chemical edge, the kind that stings the back of your throat. I sat there, heart beating too hard, staring at the dark window. I almost woke him, but I knew how that would go. He would laugh, call me jumpy, tell me to get back to sleep. So I lay back down, eyes open, every nerve in my body tight. The chanting drifted in and out, like a tide. Sometimes close enough to make out syllables I did not recognize, sometimes so faint it was gone. I do not think I slept at all. In the morning the glow was gone, just trees and ridges like always, nothing out of place. I almost convinced myself I had dreamed it, that I had worked myself up over nothing. But when I stepped outside, I could still smell it faintly in the air, that bitter smoke, and the birds were quieter than usual, the woods too still. My uncle walked out, yawning, scratching his beard, and I almost said something. I wanted to tell him about the voices, about the smoke, but I stopped myself. He would just brush it off, and I would sound like some spooked kid, so I swallowed it and followed him out to the stand like nothing was wrong. But the whole day, my eyes kept drifting back toward the trees where I had seen that glow. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of the wind, I found myself turning my head, half expecting to see it again. I told myself it was nothing. I tried to bury it, but that night, when the sky went dark, I felt the unease come back, crawling up my spine. I knew I would hear it again, and deep down, I knew it would be louder. The second night was worse. I could feel it pressing in even before the sun dropped below the ridge. The woods had that charged silence, the kind that makes you keep glancing over your shoulder even when you know there is nothing there. My uncle did not seem to notice. He went about things the same as always, checking his rifle, cooking up beans on the stove, talking about how he hoped we would see some movement in the morning. I nodded along, but my head was somewhere else. When it finally got dark, I could not stop myself from looking through the window, searching that stretch of trees where the glow had been. For a while it was just blackness. Then, like a match flaring in the distance, the red light appeared again, not faint, not fading like firelight, steady, unnatural. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth, and just stared. My uncle followed my gaze, grunted, and shook his head. "Probably some fool kids out there messing around," he said, though his voice did not carry much conviction. He turned back to his food and kept eating. I could not. I set the bowl down. My stomach knotted too tight to take another bite. The glow was stronger now, almost pulsing, though maybe that was just my eyes playing tricks. I stepped outside for some air, and the cold hit me like a slap. It was dead quiet. No crickets, no owls, just the sound of my breath clouding in front of me. And then the chanting started again. This time there was no mistaking it. It was closer, clearer, the rhythm unmistakable. Low voices, rising and falling together, strange syllables that made my skin crawl even though I could not understand a word. I stood there with my boots in the dirt, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. The smell came next, stronger than the night before, bitter and heavy, like wet wood mixed with burning hair. I gagged and stumbled back inside, slamming the door behind me. My uncle looked up, surprised, but when I tried to explain, the words stuck. I must have sounded half-crazed, babbling about chanting and smoke. He put a hand up to calm me down, said we would check it out in the morning, that no one would be out there all night this deep in the woods. But the chanting did not stop. It wove through the trees, sometimes fading, sometimes swelling, until it felt like the voices were just beyond the walls of the cabin. My uncle tried to act like it was nothing, but I noticed he cleaned his rifle twice that night, his eyes flicking toward the window more than once. Lying in my bunk, I kept staring at the ceiling, listening. The voices rose and fell like a tide, and every time I started to drift toward sleep, they surged back stronger, pulling me awake. Around what must have been the middle of the night, my dog started whining, low and steady, ears flat against his head. I tried to soothe him, but he only got more agitated, pacing the floor, claws clicking on the wood. Then he stopped dead, staring at the door, a growl deep in his chest. The chanting stopped at that exact moment. The silence that followed was worse. It felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting. I held my breath, straining to hear anything at all. That was when I caught it. a faint crackle, like fire eating through dry wood, and then, far too close for comfort, a voice not in unison this time but alone, clear enough that I swear it spoke words in English. "We see you." I shot up in bed, every muscle in my body tensed. My uncle was awake now too, sitting upright, his hand on his rifle. His face was pale, the bravado gone. He had heard it too. We sat there, frozen, staring at the door, the smell of burning stronger than ever. Minutes dragged by, though it felt like hours. No more voices, no footsteps, no knock at the door. Just that smell and the heavy silence. Eventually, somehow, we both dozed off in the chairs by the stove, rifles across our laps. Morning brought a thin gray light and a frost that clung to the grass. For a few blissful seconds I thought maybe it had been a dream, the kind of thing that makes sense in the night but falls apart in daylight. But when I stepped outside, my stomach dropped. On the dirt just beyond the porch were marks. Not footprints exactly, but scuffed patches in the frost. Long streaks like something had been dragged. They formed a rough circle around the cabin, not random at all. My uncle crouched down, touched the ground, and swore under his breath. Neither of us said much after that. We ate in silence, packed our rifles, and headed out to hunt like we had planned. But my heart was not in it. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves made me jump. The woods no longer felt like the safe place I had known since childhood. It felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with deer or turkey. We stayed out until early afternoon, saw nothing, and trudged back. I could tell my uncle was rattled, though he tried to hide it. He walked faster than usual, kept scanning the trees, and when we got back to the cabin, he checked every window and door like he was making sure we were not being watched. That night, I begged him to let us leave early, but he refused. "One more day," he said firmly, though I caught the tightness in his voice. He was too proud to admit he was scared, but I knew he was. As the sky went dark, I felt my chest tighten again. I did not want to look, but I could not stop myself. Out through the trees, that same red glow flickered to life. Stronger now, closer, and for the first time, I thought I saw movement in it. Shadows crossing in front of the light, shapes that did not look entirely human. I shut the curtain, sat back down by the stove, and tried not to breathe too loud. But the chanting was already starting up again. Louder, clearer, and this time, it did not sound like it was coming from far away. By the third night, neither of us were pretending anymore. My uncle tried to act like everything was fine, but I could see it in the way he paced the small cabin, the way he kept the rifle close even while stirring beans on the stove. The smell of smoke still hung faint in the air, even in daylight, and I swear, more than once that morning, I caught him staring into the trees as if expecting someone to step out at any second. We spent the day walking ridge lines, but neither of us said much. The forest felt wrong, too still. The usual calls of birds and the rustle of squirrels in the underbrush were gone. Our boots crunched on the frosted leaves, and each sound seemed too loud. I tried to start conversations, but they petered out fast. We were both listening, waiting. By late afternoon, when we headed back, I was exhausted from nerves alone. My legs ached, and the cold seemed sharper, biting through the layers of clothes. I wanted to pack up and leave. But when I suggested it again, he shook his head firmly, saying we would stay the night and leave at dawn. He was stubborn like that, but I also think he felt something he could not explain, the kind of pride that would not let him run from it. That evening, as the sky drained of light, the glow returned. I felt it before I saw it, a pressure building in my chest, an awareness that something was coming. When I finally looked through the window, there it was again. The red light bled through the trees, steady, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I turned away, but my uncle was already pulling on his coat. "We are going to see it," he said, voice low and flat. Every part of me wanted to argue, but I followed. I think I was afraid of staying behind even more. We left the dog in the cabin, though he whined and scratched at the door, his nails scraping wood like he was desperate to stop us. My uncle muttered for me to keep quiet, and we stepped into the dark. The forest swallowed us fast. The beam of my flashlight cut across trunks and branches, but beyond that was nothing. The glow, though, was like a beacon, steady and impossible to mistake. Each step closer made my stomach knot tighter. The smell grew stronger, too, that acrid smoke mixing with something sweeter, like burning meat. We broke into a small clearing, and there it was. A cabin, larger than I expected, squatting in the center like it had been waiting. Every seam glowed red, light spilling out between the boards as though the whole thing was burning inside. But there were no flames licking skyward, no smoke rising, just that steady, pulsing glow. I wanted to stop right there, but my uncle pressed on, crouching low. We circled wide until we found a window, grime-streaked and cracked. He raised a finger for silence, then slowly, carefully, wiped a small clear patch with his sleeve. We both leaned close. Inside, the glow was even brighter. Candles lined the walls, dozens of them, dripping wax-down carved wooden shelves. Bones were scattered in piles along the floor, bleached white under the red light. Some were small, too small, and my throat tightened when I realized what that meant. Then movement. 6 or 7 figures stood around a pit in the center. Their bodies were covered in long robes, hoods pulled low, faces hidden. They swayed together, chanting in a rhythm that made the boards of the cabin seem to vibrate. Their voices were low, deep, carrying weight like a current you could feel in your bones. My stomach dropped when I saw what was in the pit. It was not just fire. Something wrapped in a tarp, large and heavy, had been dragged into the flames. The edges blackened, curled, then gave way, and something pale showed through, a shape that looked too much like a hand. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My uncle caught my arm, his grip iron tight. His face was gray in the glow, jaw clenched, eyes wide. For the first time in my life, I saw him afraid. We should have left then. We should have run. But something made us stay, frozen, staring through the glass like moths to the flame. Then one of the figures stopped moving. Slowly, deliberately, it lifted its head. Though the hood shadowed the face, I knew it was looking right at us. My uncle cursed under his breath and shoved me back, and the two of us scrambled away from the wall. The chanting stopped. Dead silence. I could feel it, the air shifting, like the moment before a storm breaks. We ran then, crashing through brush, branches tearing at our clothes. Behind us, I swear I heard footsteps, steady and in unison, like the whole group had turned toward us. We did not stop until the cabin was in sight again, our own cabin, dark and still against the trees. We stumbled inside, slammed the door, and locked it. My uncle leaned against the wall, gasping, sweat dripping down his temple despite the cold. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The only sound was the dog whining, pacing in circles, barking at the door. I finally asked what he had seen. He shook his head once, slow, and said nothing. Just loaded his rifle again, his hands shaking enough that the bullets rattled against the wood table. That night, the chanting came again. Louder, this time, closer, and for the first time, I thought I could make out the words. Not English, not anything I had ever heard before, but words all the same, syllables that pressed hard against my ears until I wanted to cover them. I lay there, rifle on my chest, eyes open to the dark, every nerve stretched thin. The dog would not stop growling, low and steady, his hackles raised, staring at the door. And just before dawn, when I thought I could not take another minute, the chanting stopped. But in the silence that followed, I heard something worse. Breathing, slow, steady breathing. And it was coming from just outside the window. When the sun finally bled through the curtains, I half expected to find the window shattered and the floor scattered with footprints. But there was nothing. just the pale gray light of dawn and the smell of cold earth seeping in from the cracks in the walls. My uncle looked like he had not slept at all. His eyes were sunken, rimmed red, and his shoulders slumped like the weight of the night had pressed him flat. We did not speak as we cooked breakfast. Even the dog was quieter, though he stayed close, circling us nervously, ears pricked to every sound. The silence in the forest outside felt heavier than ever. No birds, no wind, not even the creak of trees shifting. It was like the woods were holding their breath. I wanted to leave that morning. Every bone in my body screamed to pack up and head back to the truck, no matter how long the hike. But my uncle insisted on staying, and I could see it was not stubbornness this time. It was something deeper, a kind of dread that if we left too soon, we might not make it out. He kept muttering under his breath that we needed to wait for the right time, though he never explained what that meant. By afternoon, I was restless. I walked the edge of the clearing around the cabin, looking for any sign of what we had heard. At first, it was just frost and leaves, but then I saw them again. Marks in the dirt, too deliberate to be random. Not footprints, not quite, but patterns scraped into the earth, curved lines and jagged angles, the same kind of shapes we had seen carved inside the barn. I crouched down, tracing one with my finger. The dirt was loose, freshly disturbed. I looked up and realized they circled the cabin again, only this time the marks were closer, pressed right up against the walls. When I went back inside and told my uncle, he only nodded grimly. He already knew. That night we lit no lanterns. We sat in the dark, rifles ready, every nerve stretched tight. The dog whined at the door until my uncle hushed him with a hand on his collar. Time crawled, and I kept glancing at my watch even though the ticking made me sick with anticipation. Around the time the sky outside turned black, the glow appeared again. It was closer now. No longer a faint smear in the distance, but a steady pulse that spilled through the trees, painting the trunks in bloody light. My uncle shifted in his chair, jaw clenched, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Whatever this was, it was moving toward us. The chanting began again soon after, louder this time, deep voices that seemed to crawl through the walls themselves. The dog growled low, pressed flat to the floorboards, ears pinned back. The sound grew and grew until it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. It was everywhere, filling the room, vibrating in my chest. Then something new, a knock. 3 sharp raps on the door, so loud it echoed through the cabin. My blood went cold. My uncle raised his rifle, eyes locked on the door. Neither of us moved. The knocking came again, harder this time, rattling the wood on its hinges. Then a voice, clear and deep, speaking words I did not understand. The syllables stretched and twisted, not quite human, and yet something in them scraped at the back of my mind, like I should have known them all along. I could not breathe. My chest tightened, and for a moment I thought I might faint. My uncle whispered sharply, telling me not to answer, not to move. I clutched my rifle, knuckles white, trying to still the trembling in my hands. The voice stopped. Silence pressed in, heavier than ever. Then, slowly, I heard footsteps moving around the cabin. One pair at first, then another, then more, circling, deliberate. The boards above our heads creaked as if someone had climbed onto the roof. My uncle and I sat back to back in the center of the room, aiming upward and outward, waiting for whatever would come. Glass shattered suddenly, the small kitchen window breaking inward. I spun, heart in my throat, but there was nothing there, just shards on the floor and the cold night air spilling in. Then, almost immediately, a crash from the other side, another window gone. The dog barked furiously, lunging against his collar, and in that moment I thought the whole cabin would come apart. My uncle shouted, and I shouted too, though I barely heard my own voice over the noise. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. No more chanting, no more footsteps, no more knocking, just silence. The red glow outside flickered once, twice, then dimmed to nothing, leaving the forest black again. I sat frozen, rifle still raised, unable to trust what my eyes were telling me. My uncle lowered his weapon slowly, breathing hard through his teeth. We stayed awake until dawn, waiting for the next sound, but none came. When the sun rose, the forest looked ordinary again. Frost on the ground, bare branches reaching into a pale sky, the kind of morning I had seen 100 times before. But the windows were still shattered, glass scattered across the floor, and outside, the marks in the dirt were fresh again, deeper, carved with more force. They covered the ground in front of every door and window, curling into symbols I could not begin to understand. My uncle did not even try to explain. He only said we would not spend another night there. We packed quickly, barely speaking, and I felt a strange relief when the cabin disappeared behind us through the trees. Still, as we hiked back toward the truck, I could not shake the feeling that the forest was watching. The silence clung too thick, and sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I thought I saw movement. A flicker of red, a shift of shadow, always gone when I turned my head. And though we were walking away, though the cabin was miles behind us, I could still hear it. That slow, deliberate knock, echoing in my skull. Leaving the forest should have been a relief. I kept telling myself we were almost out, that every step was bringing us closer to the road, closer to my uncle's truck, closer to something normal. But the deeper we went, the worse it felt. The silence in the woods pressed in harder with every mile. My boots crunched leaves. My uncle's rifle knocked softly against his shoulder with each step, and those were the only sounds. No birds, no wind, not even the faintest hum of insects. It was like we were walking through a dead world. We stopped once to rest, and I sat on a fallen log, wiping sweat off my forehead. My uncle stood the whole time, scanning the trees, his finger tapping against the stock of his rifle like he was trying to bleed off nervous energy. When I asked if he thought we were being followed, he did not answer. He only said we needed to keep moving, and his voice cracked slightly in a way I had never heard from him before. By late afternoon, the light began to change. The trees thinned, the air grew sharper, and I thought I saw a strip of road through the branches. For the first time in 2 days, my chest loosened. I wanted to run the rest of the way, to break free of the trees and leave the red glow behind us forever. But then the smell hit. That same acrid smoke, mixed with the sickly sweet stench of burnt meat. It came strong and sudden, like stepping into an invisible wall. My uncle froze. I froze too. Neither of us said a word, but both of us turned our heads in the same direction. Through the trees, the glow was back. Not faint, not distant, but close. So close, it painted the bark around us in streaks of red. My uncle swore under his breath, gripping the rifle tight, and pulled me toward the road. We half ran, half stumbled, branches slapping our faces, roots catching our boots. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The glow did not fade behind us. If anything, it seemed to follow, sliding through the trees, always just behind. We burst out onto the dirt road at last, gasping for breath. The truck was there, exactly where we had left it. Relief nearly buckled my knees. I thought we were saved. But when we got close, we saw the hood. Symbols had been carved deep into the metal, lines and curves gouged so sharp the paint had peeled away. They were the same symbols we had seen inside the barn, the same ones scratched into the ground around the cabin. The marks caught the last of the evening light, raw and jagged, and my stomach turned cold. "Get in," my uncle barked. His voice was tight, panicked in a way that rattled me more than anything else. We piled into the cab. He jammed the key into the ignition, but the engine coughed once, twice, and died. He tried again. Nothing. The smell of smoke grew stronger, seeping through the vents. I looked out the passenger window and nearly screamed. Figures were gathering at the tree line. Hooded shapes, 6 or 7 of them, standing perfectly still, their faces hidden. They did not move, did not chant. They only watched. My uncle cursed and slammed his fist against the wheel. He told me to hold on, then twisted the key again. The engine roared to life this time, sputtering but running. He slammed it into gear, and the truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. The figures did not move to stop us. They only stood there, watching, the glow pulsing behind them until the trees swallowed them from view. We drove in silence for a long time. The road twisted and turned, the forest falling away on either side, until finally, lights appeared ahead. A gas station, bright and humming, a piece of the real world I thought I might never see again. We pulled in and parked, both of us breathing hard, sweat soaking through our shirts despite the cold night air. I stepped out, legs shaking, and leaned against the hood, staring at the gouged symbols in the metal. In the bright fluorescent light, they looked even worse. Raw, violent. My uncle lit a cigarette with trembling hands, something he had not done in years. He smoked in silence, staring off down the road, like he expected the glow to roll up out of the darkness at any second. I went inside the station, desperate for something normal, even just the hum of freezers and the smell of burnt coffee. The clerk barely glanced at me, scrolling on his phone, and for a moment I thought maybe we had left it all behind. Maybe it was done. But when I stepped into the bathroom, I froze. The mirror above the sink was smeared with something dark, streaks drawn into shapes I recognized immediately. The same curves and jagged lines, the same symbols. My stomach dropped, and I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the trash bin. I told myself it had to be coincidence, some punk with a marker, anything else. But deep down, I knew. The symbols were following us. When I got back outside, my uncle was already in the truck, engine running, eyes wild. He told me to get in, now, and I did not argue. We drove all night, barely speaking, the road stretching ahead like it would never end. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I woke, the sun was up, and we were pulling into his driveway. For the first time, I thought maybe we were safe. Until I saw the porch. On the wooden boards, carved deep into the grain, were the same symbols. Fresh, sharp, curling across the steps like they had been waiting for us. I wish I could tell you that walking into my uncle's house that morning felt like safety. That after everything we had seen, stepping into four walls that were ours, into a space we could lock and control, meant it was over. But the truth is, the moment I saw those symbols carved into his porch, I knew the line had been crossed. It was not just in the woods anymore. It was with us. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking. The dog whined softly, circling at our feet, tail pressed tight between his legs. My uncle's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. He finally muttered something I could barely hear, more to himself than to me. We should not have watched. We should never have looked. Inside, the air felt wrong. I cannot explain it better than that. The curtains were drawn, the morning sun spilling through in fractured beams, but the house seemed darker somehow, heavier. Every sound was too sharp, the tick of the clock on the wall, the creak of the floorboards under our boots, the shallow rasp of our breathing. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my shaking hands, while my uncle paced the length of the room, smoking one cigarette after another. At some point, I do not know when, I fell asleep in the chair. When I woke, it was dusk. My uncle was gone. His rifle leaned against the wall, his jacket still hanging on the hook. The dog sat in the doorway, ears pricked, watching the porch with unblinking eyes. My chest tightened with a cold, sinking dread. I stepped outside, calling his name, but the only sound that came back was the low hiss of the wind through the trees. That was when I saw it. Another carving in the wood, fresh, so sharp the edges still splintered. A single symbol, larger than the rest, curling across the step like it had been waiting for me. The sound of chanting rose again, faint but unmistakable. My stomach twisted. It was coming from the woods, drifting through the trees, that same low drone of voices in unison. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, that exhaustion and fear were playing tricks on me. But then the glow returned. Not faint this time, not distant. The red light burned strong, spilling between the trunks, pulsing like a heartbeat. I stumbled back into the house, slamming the door shut, but the glow bled in through the cracks, painting the walls in streaks of blood red. The dog growled low, pressing against my leg, his body trembling. The chanting grew louder, closer. I backed away from the door, tripping over a chair, landing hard on the floor. From where I lay, I could see through the window. Figures, half a dozen at least, standing just beyond the porch, hoods drawn, faces hidden. They did not move, they did not speak. But the chanting continued, echoing from everywhere at once, vibrating through the floorboards, crawling into my chest. Then one of them lifted something, a lantern maybe, though the light it gave off was wrong. Not fire, not anything I could name. The glow pulsed brighter, and for a moment the figures seemed to blur, their shapes twisting, elongating, bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I blinked, and they were solid again. The dog barked once, sharp and desperate, before retreating under the table. I scrambled to my feet, fumbling for the rifle. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold it steady. I pointed it at the door, heart slamming in my chest, breath coming in ragged gasps. Who? The chanting stopped. Silence, heavy, crushing, then 3 knocks. Sharp, deliberate, the same rhythm we had heard at the cabin. I froze, the rifle still aimed at the door, sweat dripping down my face. My legs trembled so badly I thought they might give out. The dog whimpered. And then, nothing. No more chanting, no more glow, no more figures, just the dark, empty woods outside. I do not remember falling asleep, but at some point I woke in the chair again. Morning light filtered through the curtains, and the forest looked ordinary. The porch was bare, no figures, no glow. Only the symbols remained, carved deep into the wood. My uncle never came back. The police told me he had probably wandered off in the night. Hunters sometimes did that, they said, disoriented, lost in the dark. They searched the woods for days but found nothing, not a jacket, not a boot, not even a footprint. I did not tell them about the chanting. I did not tell them about the glow, or the hooded figures, or the symbols carved into the porch. I knew they would never believe me. I left the next week, packed my things, drove across state lines, found a small apartment in a city where the trees do not crowd so close. I told myself I was done with it, that leaving meant it could not follow me. But some nights, around the same time the chanting used to start, I wake up and smell smoke, acrid, sharp, mixed with something sweet and rotten. The dog growls at the door, his fur standing on end. And once, when I looked through the window, I thought I saw it. A faint red glow, far away, but closer than it should have been. I tell myself it is just in my head, that fear can linger long after the danger is gone, but I cannot shake the feeling that whatever we saw that night, whatever we stumbled into, is not finished with me. I do not go camping anymore. I do not hike. I do not wander back roads. I do not chase the quiet of the woods, because I know what waits there when the sun goes down, and I know, one night, it will find me again. I've been driving for rideshare apps off and on for a couple of years, nights mostly. It fits my schedule, and frankly, people are quieter after midnight, less small talk, more silence. I liked that, the quiet, the dark. It helped me think. That night started like any other. A few airport runs, some drunk college kids who wanted to stop for fast food, a guy in a suit who didn't say a word but left $100 tip. Routine. I just dropped someone off on the edge of the city. near the industrial park, those wide roads that look like they go on forever, half lit and echoey, even when your engine's idling. I remember thinking it was later than usual, around 2:30 a.m., maybe closer to 3. I pulled over near a small gravel pullout to stretch my legs, check my phone, maybe call it for the night. That's when I got the ping. The screen lit up with a single word, pick up. No name, no photo, no rating, just a location, a nearby side road that led into the hills. Weird, but not impossible. The app glitches sometimes. I figured it was a one-off. Maybe a tourist who couldn't get a signal. Maybe a dead zone threw off the map. But the thing was, it didn't ask me to accept the ride. No green button, no confirmation. It was just there. Already marked, in progress. I should have driven off. I should have closed the app and gone home. But something about it held me. That little pin blinking slowly on the map like it was waiting for me. I sat there for a solid minute, staring at the screen. Then, before I really made a conscious choice, I shifted into drive and headed toward it. The pickup point wasn't far, just a quarter-mile down a winding road, no streetlights, trees lining both sides, heavy and still. I turned the music off without really thinking about it. Just wanted to hear the world around me. There was a figure standing at the side of the road when I pulled up. A man, tall, pale, wearing a dark coat that looked too thin for the cold. He didn't have any luggage or a phone out, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, staring straight ahead like he'd been waiting for something more than just a ride. I leaned over and cracked the window. "You, call a ride?" He didn't look at me, just nodded once, slowly, and walked around to the back door, got in without a word. I glanced in the rear view. He buckled his seatbelt carefully, almost mechanically, and stared out the front windshield. Never met my eyes. I cleared my throat. "All right, where to?" "East," he said. His voice was low, even and dry. "Keep going. I'll tell you when to stop." I hesitated. "You got an address?" "Just drive." Now, I've had some weird passengers before. One guy who insisted I take only left turns. A woman who cried silently the entire ride and tipped me in foreign coins. But this guy, there was something different. It wasn't the way he talked or didn't talk. It was the weight of him. Like he pulled the air down around him, like the car had gotten colder when he got in. Still, I pulled away. We drove in silence for a while, 15 minutes, maybe 20. The city fell behind us. The road narrowed. No signs, no traffic, just 2 yellow lines leading us through the dark. I started to feel wrong. Not scared exactly, just off, like I wasn't supposed to be here. Finally, I tried to break the silence. "So, you visiting from out of town?" "Nothing. Been a quiet night," I said. "You're probably my last ride." He didn't even blink, just kept staring forward, both hands clenched tightly on his seatbelt, white-knuckled, like he was bracing for impact. I glanced at him again through the mirror. "You okay, man?" That's when he spoke, quiet, measured, but firm. "Keep going, even if it feels wrong." The words landed like a weight in my chest. "What does that mean?" Silence. I gripped the wheel tighter. The road was winding now, climbing steadily uphill. Trees pressed in on both sides, no houses, no lights. Just that long stretch of two-lane blacktop, disappearing into dark woods. I checked my phone, no signal, no map. The app had closed itself out. "All right, look," I said, slowing down a bit. "I need a destination. I can't just keep driving into the middle of nowhere. I'm gonna pull over unless you tell me where we're going." He didn't move, didn't speak, just kept staring straight ahead. That's when I looked in the mirror again. He wasn't breathing. I don't mean he was holding his breath or anything. I mean he wasn't moving at all. No rise and fall in his chest, no shifting in his seat, just stillness, dead stillness. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper now. "I'm serious. This isn't funny." Still nothing. I pulled the car over onto the dirt shoulder and threw it in park, turned around fully in my seat. "Listen, man, I don't know what this is, but the back seat was empty." My mouth went dry. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I blinked, looked again. Nothing. The seatbelt was still buckled. I threw the door open and stumbled out of the car, my shoes crunching on gravel. I opened the rear door. No one. The seat was warm. And there, on the floor, was a single thing I hadn't noticed before. A small, cracked phone. No case, no lock screen, just a dead screen. I picked it up, hands shaking, pressed the power button. Nothing. I stood there for a long moment, in the cold, under a sky full of stars I hadn't even realized were there. And from somewhere deeper in the woods, I thought I heard footsteps. But they were walking away. Not toward me. I didn't get back in the car right away. I just stood there, holding that old phone, trying to convince myself that maybe I'd just been tired, that the man had gotten out quietly, that I'd imagined his voice, that I'd misunderstood the whole thing. But that wasn't true, because I remember what he said. "Keep going, even if it feels wrong." And I'd never said a word about it. Not until now. I got back in the car after maybe 10 minutes of standing there. Could have been longer. Could have been less. Time had started to feel a little stretchy out there, like the woods had their own clock and I wasn't on it. I was still holding the dead phone in my hand. I didn't know why I'd taken it with me. Maybe because I didn't want to leave it behind. Maybe because part of me thought it would light up and explain everything. It didn't. I started the engine, half expecting it not to turn over, but it purred to life like it always did, normal, familiar. The heater clicked on, blowing stale warm air into my face. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror for a few seconds. My eyes looked strange, hollow. I looked like I hadn't slept in days. I took a deep breath and pulled back onto the road, heading toward the city. I didn't look in the back seat. Couldn't. It was like a rule I didn't know I'd agreed to. The drive back was silent, too silent. No bugs, no owls, no trees rustling like they should have been. Even the tires seemed quieter than normal. I kept glancing at the dash clock every few minutes. But it was stuck, said it was 2:39 a.m. the whole way back, even though I knew I'd been gone longer than that. Eventually I made it back into cell range, and my phone buzzed violently in my pocket like it had been holding its breath. Notifications poured in: texts, app updates, a voicemail from my brother asking if I was still coming over the next day. I opened the rideshare app first. No record of the trip. No fare, no pickup history, no in-progress ride. My last logged trip had been the airport drop-off 2 hours before I'd met him, nothing in between. I sat at a red light near the edge of town, blinking at the screen. I hadn't imagined it. The warmth of the back seat, the words he spoke, the sound of his voice, they were all still with me, heavy and clear. I tried the GPS history. Nothing. No route saved, just the line from my last legitimate fare. No winding road, no pin. I turned the cracked phone over in my hand again. It had no branding, no SIM card slot, just a faint indentation on the back like it had been jammed into something hard. I tried pressing the power button again. Still nothing. I opened the glove box and tossed it in, slammed it shut harder than I meant to. I didn't tell anyone about what happened, not right away. What would I even say? That I'd picked up a passenger who vanished in thin air. That I'd followed a ghost into the woods because my app glitched. That his last words made my chest feel like it was being crushed. I drove home and sat in the driveway until the sun came up. Then I went inside and showered with the door open. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next day, I found muddy footprints on my welcome mat, not mine, too small, too narrow. I'd cleaned the place the day before. They hadn't been there then. They led right up to the door and stopped. No matching prints leading away, just a single trail in and nothing else. That night, my hallway light turned on by itself around 2 a.m. I heard the click from my bedroom. I live alone. I keep the hallway switch taped because it used to flicker and drive me nuts. It didn't flicker this time. Just glowed solid. A few nights later, I was driving again. I'd taken a break from rideshare, but figured I needed to push past it, get back to normal. It was late, and I was doing a loop around the city when I got a ping. This time it came through the right way: name, pickup location, destination. I checked the name. Noah. The same name from the cracked phone's lock screen. I hadn't told anyone about it. I hadn't even opened the glove box since. I let the request expire without accepting. My heart was racing. It was probably coincidence. There are thousands of Noahs, but I couldn't bring myself to take the risk. The next day, I opened the glove box and pulled out the phone again. Still dead, still cracked. But this time, when I tilted it toward the light, I saw something I hadn't before. Faint. Like it had been written in dust or grease on the screen's edge. Finish the job. I dropped it like it burned. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My apartment was quiet, but too quiet. Like everything was waiting. At exactly 2:39 a.m., my bedroom light turned on. Not flickered. Turned on. There was no click, no sound, just light. I sat up slowly, chest pounding. The hallway was dark, the door was open. I hadn't left it open. And for a second, just a second, I swear I saw someone standing at the end of the hall. Tall, still, watching. Then the light went off. I didn't get out of bed. The next morning I opened my rideshare app and deleted it, but it reinstalled itself that night. I don't know how. I didn't touch it. It came back with a single notification. You still have one ride left. I haven't driven since, but I keep seeing him. Not just at night, during the day too, reflected in windows, in the shadows behind parked cars, standing at bus stops, looking the wrong direction, not moving, just waiting. I tried talking to a friend about it, told him about the strange ride, left out the supernatural parts. He laughed it off, said I needed sleep. That night, he called me, said he'd gotten a ride request. No name, no destination. Just a pickup point in the woods outside the city. He didn't take it. But when he got home, there was a single word written in dust on his windshield. Go. It's spreading, and I think I know why. That man Noah, whatever he wasn't just a passenger. He was something else. And now he's looking for someone new. I've always thought I was a pretty logical person, like not the type to fall into ghost stories or superstition. I'm the kind of guy who triple checks facts before believing anything, especially the weird stuff. So trust me when I say if I could write this off as a dream, or stress, or sleep deprivation, I would. I've tried, believe me. But every time I start to convince myself I imagined it, something else happens. Something small, something subtle, but just real enough to snap me back into it. I didn't even tell my friend Jason the full story at first. I just said I'd had a weird ride one night, and the guy creeped me out. Told him the guy had no destination and said something unsettling. Jason just laughed it off, like I expected. Said maybe the dude was on something. And yeah, to be fair, I've had people get in my car higher than a kite before. Happens. But this wasn't that. I thought about telling him more. About the app glitch, the man disappearing, the cracked phone. But the minute I imagined the words coming out of my mouth, I could already hear the reply, "Dude, you need to sleep." And maybe I did, still do. But then Jason called me. That was 3 nights ago. His voice was different on the phone, quieter. He didn't make a joke, which for him is like a cat not hissing. Something had to be seriously off. He told me he got a ride request late at night, just like I had. No name, no destination, just a blinking pickup pin. And it wasn't even on the map, it was in that weird gray no man's land, where the roads kind of blur and the app stutters. He didn't take it. He said the second he saw it, his stomach dropped. Felt like the air got thicker, he said, like something was watching through the screen. And that would have been bad enough. But then he got home and found one word scrawled into the grime on his windshield. Go. Not something you can laugh off. He was freaked. I could hear it in his voice. I asked if he still had the message, and he said no. He wiped it off right away. I get that. I would have too. That's when I told him everything. Not just the creepy ride, but the missing record, the empty back seat, the cold silence, the same line the guy whispered, "Keep going, even if it feels wrong." I told him about the cracked phone I still had stashed in my glove box, and how it never turned on, but had that faint scrawl on the glass. Finish the job. And Jason went dead silent for like 30 seconds. Then he just said, "Man, I think you passed it on." I didn't have a response for that. I spent the next day doing what I always do. When something doesn't make sense, I Googled it. I started looking into similar stories. I dug through forums, Reddit threads, even creepypasta sites I normally roll my eyes at. I didn't care. I just wanted to find someone who'd experienced something even remotely like what I did. And I found a few scattered comments, buried deep under unrelated posts, people talking about ghost fares, passengers vanishing mid-trip, GPS routes leading nowhere, clocks freezing at weird times. One post stuck out. A guy from New Mexico, username long deleted, wrote that he'd been driving late one night when he got a ride request that came through, already marked in progress. He picked up a man who said, "It's not about the destination, just keep going." The man never made eye contact, never spoke again. That driver said he made it 30 miles outside the city before realizing he wasn't following any road he recognized. Then his app crashed. And when he looked in the back seat, the man was gone. Just like me. He ended the post with, "Now it's my turn to find someone else, because that's how it works. I didn't finish the job, so it's not over." And yeah, I know how it sounds, like a chain letter or some urban legend. A dumb story meant to get a rise out of people, but it didn't feel like that. The way it was written, the tone, the pacing, it didn't read like fiction. It felt like someone unraveling, someone real. Someone like me. I couldn't stop thinking about the phrase, "finish the job." What does that even mean? Is it literal, metaphorical? Am I supposed to do something or not do something? The not knowing is the worst part. That night, I went out to my car again, just to sit, just to, I don't know, feel connected to what happened, I guess. I didn't turn on the engine. Just sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard, like it might blink to life and explain things. I was there for maybe 10 minutes when the smell hit me. It wasn't strong, not at first, just a faint scent in the air, like dirt, wet, earthy dirt, the kind that smells like it was just turned, like something had been buried and recently dug back up. It wasn't there before. I checked under the seats, floor mats, glove box, nothing. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing in the seat. But it looked off. The seat belt. It was buckled again. I know I unbuckled it. I remember it being loose. But now it was perfectly fastened. I got out of the car so fast I nearly tripped over myself. I didn't even lock the doors behind me, just went back inside and slammed the front door like it could stop whatever was happening. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that back seat, the way he sat there, so still, like he was waiting. For what? I have no clue. But it's like the moment you notice something is wrong and can't unsee it, that gut-level panic that makes your spine feel hollow. The next morning, my phone had a new notification. The rideshare app had reinstalled itself, again. Same message. One ride left. And this time, the pickup pin? It was right outside my apartment, like 20 feet from my front door. I watched it blink on the screen for over an hour. I never opened the door, never checked outside. I was scared, not just scared, but that weird kind of fear where it feels like you're on the edge of something. Like if you look, you'll see, and once you see, you'll never unsee it again. That's where I'm at now, writing this. I haven't left my place in 2 days. I turned off my phone, threw the cracked one in the trash behind a grocery store 2 towns over. I've locked the doors, closed the curtains. I haven't dared peek outside after sunset, but I still feel him. I don't know if he's waiting for me to drive again, or if he's already inside. Maybe that's what they mean by finish the job. You drive long enough, and eventually he stops being the passenger and becomes the one behind the wheel. I don't really know what normal looks like anymore. Before all this, I used to have routines. Morning started with a strong cup of gas station coffee, followed by a scroll through my messages, checking rideshare bonuses or promotional boosts for the day. Then I'd head out, drive around the city, maybe pick up 5 or 6 passengers before lunch. Take a break, back at it until midnight if the tips were decent. That was my life. Simple, repetitive, predictable. Now I wake up and the first thing I do is check the locks. Not my phone, not my email, just the locks. Then I go to the window and stare at the street like it's going to move, like it might change. I know that sounds weird, but after everything I've told you, you can probably understand why. 2 nights ago, I found my car unlocked. That might not sound like a big deal, but I always lock it, always. It's automatic at this point. It's like muscle memory. I press the fob before I even get out sometimes. But that night, I looked out my window and saw the driver's side door was cracked open just an inch. Just enough to be obvious, enough to make a statement. I didn't go down to check right away. I stood behind the curtain, staring at it like it might close by itself if I waited long enough. I didn't move for a solid 15 minutes. My hands were shaking the whole time. Eventually, I forced myself to go down. I brought my phone in one hand and a hammer in the other, which is dumb because I've never hit anyone in my life and probably wouldn't know how. But I needed something, something to make me feel like I had control. The car was empty. Clean even, like too clean. The passenger seat looked freshly wiped. The back seat was pristine. No wrappers, no receipts, no trace of life, except for one thing. A single ride receipt had been printed and placed on the dashboard, like old school cab receipts, except I didn't have a printer in the car. I don't even own a printer. It had no date, no location, just a name, Noah, and under it, one line, trip incomplete. That was when I realized I wasn't just being haunted, I was being tracked, monitored maybe, or chosen. And here's the thing, I never picked a guy named Noah up, not officially, not on any log, not on any record, but I remember him, the way he looked straight ahead, never blinking, the way his hands gripped the seatbelt like he was holding on for more than just the ride. I tried looking him up, I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I could find something in obituary, a missing persons report, it would make this feel less insane. Like there was a reason, something I could hold on to. I didn't find anything useful, but I did find something. A post on an old paranormal forum, dated 5 years ago. Title was simple, Rideshare Glitch Anyone Else? I clicked it. Most of the replies were jokes, or people sharing creepy stories that were clearly fake. But the original post? It was different. The guy described a night almost identical to mine. Passenger shows up without a request. Long silent ride, gives no destination, repeats the line, keep going, even if it feels wrong. Ends the post by saying he saw the man again a few days later, standing outside his apartment. The post ends with, "I think I picked up something I wasn't meant to. It's not a person. It's a job that passes on. I didn't finish it, so now it's following me." That part hit hard. Because yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. Like I got handed a task I never signed up for. And every time I ignore it, every time I pretend I'm not part of it, something else goes wrong. Jason hasn't answered my texts in 2 days. Last I heard from him, he said the rideshare app reinstalled itself on his phone again, just like mine. He didn't even open it. Just powered the phone off and tossed it in a drawer. I called him yesterday, straight to voicemail. His social media is still up, but no new posts. I even DM'd his girlfriend, asking if he was all right. She replied with just one sentence. He said he was going for a drive. That was 2 nights ago. That same night, my doorbell rang at exactly 3:14 a.m. I didn't get up to answer it, just lay there under the covers, holding my breath. It rang once, then silence. I waited until the sun came up before checking the front step. Nothing was there, except for tire tracks in the street, right in front of my driveway. Not mine. I've thought a lot about what the rules are, if there are any. Like, what happens if I do pick someone up again? What if I go back to that place where I first found him and wait? Would that end it? Or would it make it worse? The note said, finish the job. But what job? Give someone a ride. Deliver him somewhere. What if I already did and failed? Here's the part that's really messing with my head. I think this thing wants to be noticed, that it needs a driver. It doesn't just show up randomly. It waits for someone with enough curiosity, someone willing to push a little too far, ignore a few too many red flags. And then it climbs in. And you don't even realize you've agreed to something until it's too late. I keep replaying that moment in the car, when he said, "You picked me up because they told you to." I brushed it off as weird rambling, but now I think he meant it literally. Like the app or whatever's behind it chose me, like I was being tested. Maybe I failed. Or maybe I passed. I don't know which would be worse. Last night, I slept in my car. I didn't mean to. I was sitting there, engine off, just thinking, and I guess I dozed off. At 3:14 a.m., I woke up. The car was ice cold. My rearview mirror had been tilted slightly, just enough that I could see my own eyes, but they didn't look like mine. I reached for the door handle and paused when I saw the cracked phone. It was back in the glove box. I hadn't touched it since throwing it away 2 towns over. And on the screen, one new message. Ready when you are. I shut the glove box and started the car. And now I'm writing this from the parking lot of an old gas station outside city limits. I don't know why I came here. It just felt right or expected. I've got half a tank of gas, My phone's at 80%. And there's a man standing under the streetlight across the road. He hasn't moved in 10 minutes. I think he's waiting for me to unlock the doors. I didn't unlock the doors. I sat there, both hands on the steering wheel, my foot hovering over the brake, heart thudding like a drum beat in my throat. The guy under the streetlight just stood there, staring. Or maybe not staring, I couldn't see his eyes from this distance, but I could feel it. That heavy pressure, like I was under a spotlight and he was waiting for a cue. I kept telling myself to start the car, just leave, floor it, don't look back, but I didn't move. It was like my limbs forgot how to respond to me, like I wasn't completely in control anymore. It was the cold, maybe. The air had this wet bite to it, like it had rained hours ago and everything still clung to that damp weight. The windows fogged slightly from my breath, and I wiped a circle clear with my sleeve. He was still there, still unmoving. That made two of us. And then he did move. One step forward. That's all. But it felt like a decision had been made. I finally broke out of it, turned the key, threw the car into reverse, and backed out of the lot faster than I should have. Tires skidded a little, and for a second I thought I'd clipped something, but when I checked the rear view, it was just shadows. Or maybe not. I didn't wait to find out. I drove for almost an hour, no destination, just moving. I turned off the GPS, turned off the music, drove until I didn't recognize any of the signs, took random exits, followed roads just to lose myself. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every now and then I'd glance at the rear view, half expecting to see someone in the back seat again. Sometimes I thought I caught a glimpse of something, just a shift of shadow, the suggestion of movement. But every time I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. I finally pulled off at a rest stop, one of those older ones with vending machines from a different decade and bathrooms that make you consider holding it in. I sat on a bench outside and stared up at the sky. I couldn't tell you what I was thinking, really. Everything was tangled, a million half-thoughts and questions. Why me? Why now? Was there a pattern? Was I supposed to do something? Or was this punishment for something I didn't even remember doing? Then my phone buzzed. No notification this time, just a buzzing like a text that didn't show up. I checked it anyway, mostly out of habit. There was a new message. You're going the wrong way. That's it. No name, no number. And that's when I noticed something else. My rideshare app was open again. I swear on everything, I didn't open it. I deleted it. Twice. But there it was. And it had a route already set. Starting point, me. Destination, unlisted. And underneath the route line was a little blinking icon, a passenger. No name, no details, just the word. Noah. Again. I stared at it for a long time. I don't even know why. It was like watching something slowly catch fire and not doing anything about it. You can't look away, even when you should. Eventually I got back in the car. I didn't start it right away, just sat there, hand on the keys, trying to steady my breathing. I told myself I wasn't going to follow the route. But I did. I don't know if I chose to or if something chose for me. It's a blurry line now. The road it took me down wasn't on any map I'd seen before. long stretches of cracked pavement, the kind with grass pushing through. No signs, no lights, just tree after tree, pressing in closer with each mile. I was maybe 15 minutes into the drive when I realized the GPS arrow was gone. Just the line now, a road to nowhere. And that's when I started hearing it again. Breathing. Not loud, just faint, like someone was sitting behind me trying not to be heard. But it was there. I turned the music up, hoping I could drown it out, but that only made it worse somehow. Like the sound had learned to hide underneath the noise. I pulled over. I needed out of the car, out of this story, out of whatever this was. I flung open the door and stepped into the dark. No lights anywhere, not even stars, just pitch-black trees and the hum of the engine behind me. And silence. I turned to look at the car and the passenger door was open. Not wide, just slightly, enough to see that it had been closed before. I didn't hear it open, didn't hear anything, but now it was ajar, and that was enough to spike the adrenaline in my throat. I walked around to check. Nothing. Back seat was empty. But the seatbelt? Buckled. Again. That was it. That was the moment I broke. I slammed the door, got back in the driver's seat, and screamed into the steering wheel. Not even words, just noise. A raw, panicked attempt to push the fear out of my body. When I looked up, the dashboard clock read 3:14 a.m. Every damn time. Something shifted then. I don't know how to explain it. The air inside the car thickened. The windows fogged instantly, like I was in a freezer. And in the rearview mirror, I saw movement. I didn't want to look, but I did. There was no one in the seat. But there was a shape in the mirror. Not solid, not clear, just wrong. Like the air had folded. And then I heard it. That same voice, dry and low, whispering from the back. You're almost there. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The car was suddenly freezing, and all I could see was that mirror, that shape, that thing that had once been a man. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe seconds, maybe longer. But then it stopped. No voice, no fog, just silence. And the sound of a new notification. My phone screen lit up. Trip complete. Underneath a single message. Thank you for driving, Noah. And then everything closed. The app, the route, the GPS. It was like nothing had ever been there. I sat in that car until daylight, shaking, staring at the empty seat beside me, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. I think I finished the job. I don't know what that means. Not really. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't being watched. At least not by him. Still, I haven't opened the glove box. Not since that night. I'm afraid there might be a new name inside. I didn't open the glove box for 3 weeks. Not once. Not even when I needed my registration after getting pulled over for a busted taillight. I gave the cop my license, smiled, apologized for not being able to find the paperwork, and drove away with a warning. The whole time, my hand hovered near the latch, but I couldn't do it. I was terrified that I'd see another phone, or a name written on old paper. Maybe something worse, something that didn't belong to me at all. After what happened that night after Noah, I needed to believe it was over. I needed to believe I'd closed whatever door I'd somehow opened. And for a while, it felt like I had. The app never came back, not even once. No more strange messages, no 3:14 a.m. wake-ups, no more open doors or whispered words or footsteps outside my apartment. Nothing. It was quiet. Not the eerie kind of quiet, not the something's about to happen kind, just peace. I started sleeping again. I deleted every rideshare related app and changed my number. I moved to a new place across town, got a job working security for a storage facility. Night shift still but stationary, locked gates, no strangers getting into my car, no destinations to follow. I even started going to therapy. I didn't tell my therapist everything, how could I? I mean, who would believe me? But I told her enough. About the ride, about how it felt, about how afraid I'd been of things I couldn't explain. She listened. She didn't interrupt. And after a while, I started to feel like I had my feet on the ground again. I still thought about Noah. Not every day, but enough. I'd catch myself looking at the rear view when I was alone in the car, or checking the dash clock out of habit, but nothing ever happened. Eventually, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, it really was over. Until last Tuesday. I was doing inventory checks in one of the back units at work, big metal containers, mostly filled with old furniture and boxes no one ever comes to claim. Most of the time it's boring, but I like the quiet. That night, I was cataloging the lock codes when I found something taped to the inside of one of the unit doors. It was a receipt, just like the one I'd found on my dashboard. But this one had no name, just a time, 3:14 a.m., and one word scribbled across the top, almost too light to see: passenger. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. My hands started shaking, but not from cold. Someone had been there. Someone knew where I worked. And maybe they weren't done with me after all. But then something else hit me. The handwriting. It wasn't the same. This one was sloppier, sharper. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it neatly and slipped it into my pocket. I went back through the storage logs for the last month, found out that unit had recently been rented just for a week, paid in cash, no real name attached, just initials. J.W. Jason. I hadn't heard from him since he said he was going for a drive. That was over a month ago. I tried his phone again, straight to voicemail. I started digging, reached out to a few mutual friends. One of them said Jason had dropped off the grid, left town maybe, told people he needed space. No one had actually seen him, not since the night he disappeared. I think he picked someone up. I think he became the driver. That's how it works, right? That's what I started to understand. The ride ends when it's passed on, when the next driver takes the wheel, when someone else picks up the fare. That's why it left me alone. Because it wasn't about me anymore. It had found someone else. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or sick to my stomach. I kept the receipt, put it in a drawer with the other one, the first one. They sit there now, side by side, proof, I guess. If I ever forget it happened, if I ever need to remember how close I got. I don't drive strangers anymore, not for money, not for favors, not even when friends beg. I sold the old car and got a new one. No ride history, no connection. I still check the back seat every night. Still wake up sometimes at 3:14 a.m., sweating, heart pounding, even when nothing's there. But I'm here. I'm alive. And I think that matters. I don't know what it was. I don't know if Noah was a ghost or a curse or something worse, but I do know this. It wanted to be remembered. That's why it kept leaving traces, notes, receipts, that weird fog in the car. The ride was never about getting somewhere, it was about passing through, taking something with it, leaving something behind. Maybe I finished the job. Maybe I didn't. But it's not my ride anymore. It belongs to someone else now. If you're reading this, if this somehow sounds familiar, if you've seen the same route pop up on your app, or found a cracked phone in your glove box, or if your dashboard clock freezes at the same time every night, don't accept the ride. Lock your doors. And for the love of God, never look in the rearview mirror. We had only been in the new house for a few weeks when the drawing showed up. It was a quiet cul-de-sac in Birmingham, the kind of place where neighbors wave from their driveways and kids ride bikes until the streetlights flicker on. Our daughter Ellie had already made a few friends, and one of them was a boy named Callum. He lived 2 doors down and had a habit of sketching houses in the neighborhood. It was his thing. Every few days he would hand someone a crayon drawing of their home, complete with stick figures and smiling suns. It was sweet, really, a little odd maybe, but harmless. One afternoon, Ellie came home with a folded piece of paper. "Callum drew our house," she said, holding it out with a grin. I unfolded it, expecting the usual childlike scrawl. And it was, mostly. The red brick facade, the white door, the 2 front windows. Even the garden gnome we had inherited from the previous owners was there, standing sentinel by the walkway. But then I noticed the attic window. It was small, tucked beneath the sloping roof, and in the drawing it was shaded dark. Inside a figure stood, not a stick figure like the rest, but a tall, thin shape with glowing eyes. 2 bright circles staring out from the blackness. I frowned. "Ellie, did Callum say anything about this?" She shrugged. "He said it's the man who sleeps up there. He watches you." A chill ran down my spine. Our attic window doesn't face the street. It's on the side of the house overlooking the backyard. From the front, it's not visible at all. For Callum to draw it, he'd have to know what it looked like. He'd have to have seen it from inside. That night, I mentioned it to my husband, Mark. "Probably just his imagination," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "Kids make stuff up all the time." "Maybe," I replied, but the unease lingered. The next day, I decided to talk to Callum's mother, Sarah. We had exchanged pleasantries before, but this was the first time I approached her with concern. "Hi, Sarah," I began. I wanted to ask you about Callum's drawings. She smiled warmly. Oh yes, he's always been into art. Loves drawing houses. I noticed he drew our attic window, I said carefully. It's not visible from the street. Her smile faltered. Well, he has a vivid imagination. Sometimes he adds things that aren't there. Did he ever mention being inside our house? She shook her head. No, I don't think so. Why? I hesitated. He said there's a man who sleeps in our attic, that he watches us. Sarah's expression turned serious. I'm sorry. That does sound unsettling. I'll talk to him. I thanked her and left, feeling no more at ease than before. That evening I decided to check the attic. The entrance was a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. I climbed up, flashlight in hand, and pushed open the hatch. The attic was empty, just as we had left it. A few boxes, some old furniture, and a layer of dust covering everything. No signs of anyone living there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Over the next few days, I tried to put it out of my mind, but then strange things started happening. I would find the attic hatch slightly ajar, even though I was sure I had closed it. Items in the house seemed to move on their own. A book left on the coffee table would be on the floor the next morning. The kitchen light would be on when I was certain I had turned it off. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps above us. Mark was asleep beside me, and Ellie was in her room. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving across the attic floor. I nudged Mark awake. Do you hear that? He listened, then shook his head. Probably the house settling. No, I insisted. It's footsteps. He sighed and got out of bed. I'll check. I followed him to the hallway. He pulled down the ladder and climbed up, flashlight in hand. Nothing up here, he called down after a few minutes. Just the usual stuff. I still felt uneasy. The next morning, I found another drawing on our doorstep. It was of our house again, but this time, the figure in the attic window was larger, more detailed. The glowing eyes were more pronounced, and the figure's hand was pressed against the glass. I showed it to Mark. This is getting creepy, he admitted. Maybe we should install some cameras. We set up a security system, placing cameras around the house and one in the attic. That night, we monitored the feeds from our phones. Around 2 a.m, the attic camera picked up movement. A shadow passed across the screen, then disappeared. Mark grabbed a baseball bat and headed for the attic. I followed, heart pounding. He climbed up and shone the flashlight around. Nothing, he said, but the camera picked up something. We reviewed the footage again. The shadow was there, unmistakable. We called the police. An officer arrived and inspected the attic. He found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone living there. Could be a glitch in the camera, he suggested. But we knew what we saw. The next day, I spoke to Sarah again. Has Callum said anything else about the man in our attic? She looked uncomfortable. He mentioned that the man is sad, that he watches because he's lonely. I felt a shiver run through me. Does he say where he comes from? She hesitated. Callum says he was here before your family moved in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the figure in the attic, the glowing eyes, the sense of being watched. I decided to go up there one more time. I climbed the ladder, flashlight in hand, and looked around. In the corner, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small, childlike drawing on the wall. It was of our house, with the attic window shaded dark, and inside the figure with glowing eyes. Beneath it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "He watches because he's lonely." I stared at it, heart pounding. Who had drawn this? When? I climbed down and closed the hatch, making sure it was secure. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. The morning after discovering the drawing in the attic, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. The figure with glowing eyes, the child's handwriting, "He watches because he's lonely," it all felt too deliberate, too personal. I decided to take a day off work to clear my head and perhaps find some rational explanation. I spent the morning researching the history of our house. The local library had archives of property records and old newspapers. I hoped to find anything that could shed light on the strange occurrences. The librarian, a kind elderly woman named Margaret, helped me navigate the dusty files. After hours of sifting through documents, I found a newspaper article from decades ago. It detailed a tragic incident. A man named Thomas lived in our house and was found dead in the attic. The article mentioned that he was a recluse, rarely seen by neighbors, and had no known family. The cause of death was listed as natural causes, but the circumstances were odd. He had been dead for weeks before anyone noticed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could this be the man Callum referred to? The one who sleeps up there and watches us? I photocopied the article and took it home. That evening, I showed the article to Mark. He read it silently, his brow furrowed. "This is unsettling," he admitted, "but it was a long time ago. Maybe it's just a coincidence." "Maybe," I replied, though I wasn't convinced. We decided to talk to Callum again. Perhaps he knew more than he let on. The next day, we invited him over for some lemonade and biscuits. He arrived, cheerful as ever, clutching his sketch pad. "Callum," I began gently, "can you tell us more about the man in the attic?" He looked up, his expression serious. "He's always there. He watches because he's lonely." "How do you know he's there?" Mark asked. Callum shrugged. "He told me." Mark and I exchanged glances. "He spoke to you?" Callum nodded. "In my dreams. He says he used to live here and misses it." I felt a lump form in my throat. Did he say his name? Callum thought for a moment. "Thomas." That was the name from the article. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Thank you, Callum," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's very helpful." After Callum left, Mark and I sat in silence. "This is getting too strange," he said finally. "Maybe we should have the house blessed or something." I nodded. "It's worth a try." We contacted a local priest, Father Andrew, who agreed to come by the next day. He arrived with a calm demeanor and listened patiently as we recounted the events. "I've dealt with similar situations," he said. "Sometimes spirits linger due to unresolved matters. A blessing might help." He walked through the house, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers. When he reached the attic, he paused. "This place feels heavy," he murmured, "as if someone is still holding on." He performed a more thorough blessing in the attic, then turned to us. "I suggest you speak to him," he said. "Let him know it's time to move on." That night, I stood in the attic, heart pounding. "Thomas," I said aloud, "I know you used to live here, but it's time to rest. You don't have to watch over us anymore." The air felt still, almost expectant. I waited, but nothing happened. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences ceased. The attic hatch remained closed, and there were no more drawings. I began to relax, thinking perhaps the blessing had worked. Then, one morning, I found a new drawing on our doorstep. It was our house again, but this time the figure in the attic was smiling. The glowing eyes were softer, and beneath the drawing were the words, "Thank you." I showed it to Mark, who smiled. "Maybe he just needed to be acknowledged," he said. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace. From that day on, there were no more disturbances. The house felt lighter, more welcoming. Callum continued to draw, but his sketches were now of gardens and sunny days. Life returned to normal, and I often thought of Thomas, hoping he had found the rest he deserved. After the blessing, things seemed to settle. The house felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere that had lingered since we moved in began to dissipate. Mark and I started to relax, believing that perhaps the spirit of Thomas had finally found peace. Ellie returned to her cheerful self, and even Callum's drawings took on a more vibrant tone, depicting sunny days and playful scenes. But peace, as we soon discovered, was fleeting. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Ellie approached me with a concerned expression. "Mom," she said, "Callum gave me another drawing today." I dried my hands and took the paper from her. It was our house again, but this time the figure in the attic window was different. The glowing eyes were gone, replaced by a dark, featureless silhouette. Beneath the drawing, in Callum's neat handwriting, were the words, "He's not alone." A chill ran down my spine. "Did Callum say anything else?" I asked. Ellie nodded. "He said the man has a friend now, someone who doesn't like us." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Callum's words in my mind. Who was this new presence? And why did it feel so menacing? The next morning, I decided to speak with Sarah again. She greeted me warmly, but her smile faded when I mentioned the new drawing. "Callum's been having nightmares," she admitted. "He talks in his sleep, says things about shadows and whispers. I've been meaning to talk to you about it." I shared my concerns, and we agreed to keep a closer eye on the children. Days passed, and the atmosphere in our home grew tense once more. Strange occurrences resumed. Objects moved on their own, cold spots appeared in rooms, and the unsettling feeling of being watched returned. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I discovered something peculiar. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was an old dusty journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was elegant and precise. As I flipped through the pages, I realized it belonged to Thomas. He wrote about his loneliness, his longing for companionship, and his belief that the house was alive, watching him. But towards the end, the entries took a darker turn. He mentioned a presence, a shadow that whispered to him, urging him to do unspeakable things. I felt a knot form in my stomach. That evening, I shared the journal with Mark. He read it silently, his brow furrowed. "This shadow," he said, "it might be what's causing all of this." We decided to consult Father Andrew again. He listened intently as we recounted the recent events and examined the journal. "This is troubling," he said. It seems Thomas wasn't just haunted by loneliness, but by something malevolent, a dark entity that may still reside in your home. He suggested a more thorough cleansing of the house, one that would require preparation and spiritual fortitude. In the days leading up to the cleansing, the disturbances intensified. Ellie began sleepwalking, often found standing beneath the attic hatch, staring upward. Mark started experiencing vivid nightmares, waking up drenched in sweat and gasping for air. The night before the cleansing, I awoke to a faint whispering. I followed the sound to the attic, where I found the hatch slightly ajar. Summoning my courage, I climbed the ladder and peeked inside. The attic was dark, but in the corner I saw two figures. One was the familiar silhouette of Thomas, his form faint and translucent. The other was a darker, more solid shadow, its presence oppressive and cold. They turned to face me, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. The dark figure stepped forward, and I quickly retreated, slamming the hatch shut. The next day, Father Andrew arrived with two fellow priests. They conducted a thorough cleansing, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water in every room. The atmosphere grew tense, and at one point, a loud crash echoed from the attic. After the ritual, Father Andrew approached us. "The dark presence has been weakened," he said, "but it's not gone. It feeds on fear and negativity. You must remain vigilant and keep your home filled with light and love." We took his advice to heart. We filled our home with laughter, music, and warmth. We spent more time together as a family, creating positive memories to counteract the darkness. Over time, the disturbances lessened. Callum's drawings returned to their cheerful nature, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. But every so often, I catch a glimpse of a shadow in the corner of my eye, or hear a faint whisper in the night. I know the darkness still lingers, waiting for a moment of weakness. And so, we remain vigilant, determined to protect our home and each other from the shadows that dwell within. The days following the second cleansing were quiet, almost unnaturally so. The house felt still, as if it were holding its breath. Mark and I tried to resume our normal routines, but a lingering unease clung to us. Ellie, however, seemed unaffected, her laughter echoing through the halls as she played with her toys. One afternoon, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed a new drawing pinned to the refrigerator. It was another of Callum's creations, depicting our house once more. But this time the attic window was empty. No figures, no glowing eyes, just a blank pane of glass. Beneath the drawing, in Callum's neat handwriting, were the words, "He left." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Perhaps the second cleansing had worked. Maybe Thomas had finally found peace. That evening, I decided to bake a batch of cookies and invite Sarah and Callum over for tea. As we sat around the kitchen table, the children playing nearby, I brought up the drawing. "Callum said the man left," I mentioned, trying to sound casual. Sarah nodded. "Yes, he told me the same. Said the man found a new home." "A new home?" I asked, puzzled. She hesitated. "He said the man moved into someone else's attic." I felt a chill run down my spine. Did he say whose? Sarah shook her head. "No, just that it was someone nearby." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the unease that settled over me. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering who the new occupant of the attic might be. The following morning, I received a call from our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. She sounded distressed. "Have you noticed anything strange lately?" she asked. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Odd noises, things moving on their own. My attic light keeps flickering, and I swear I hear footsteps up there at night." A knot formed in my stomach. "Have you checked the attic?" "Yes, but there's nothing there. Just old boxes and dust." I considered telling her about Thomas, but decided against it. Instead, I suggested she have her house blessed, just in case. Over the next few days, more neighbors reported similar occurrences: flickering lights, unexplained noises, and a general sense of unease. It seemed the presence had indeed moved on, but not far. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Ellie approached me with a concerned expression. "Mom, Callum gave me another drawing." I took the paper from her and unfolded it. It was our street, each house meticulously drawn. In the attic window of each house, a small, dark figure stood. Beneath the drawing were the words, "He visits everyone now." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The presence hadn't just moved, it was spreading. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the lights on, listening for any unusual sounds. Around midnight, I heard a faint creaking noise coming from the attic. I held my breath, straining to hear more. The creaking continued, slow and deliberate. I woke Mark, and together we climbed the ladder to the attic. The space was empty, just as before, but the air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. We decided to consult Father Andrew once more. He arrived the next day, concern etched on his face. "This is unusual," he admitted. "Spirits don't typically move from house to house like this." "Is there anything we can do?" I asked. He nodded. "We can perform a neighborhood cleansing, but it will require the participation of all the residents." We spent the next few days speaking with our neighbors, explaining the situation as delicately as possible. Some were skeptical, others frightened, but eventually everyone agreed to participate. On the appointed day, Father Andrew led the cleansing, moving from house to house, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water. The atmosphere was tense, but hopeful. After the ritual, the neighborhood felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The strange occurrences ceased, and life slowly returned to normal. Weeks passed without incident. Ellie and Callum continued to play together, their laughter a comforting sound. The drawing stopped, and the attic remained quiet. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to the garden, Callum approached me. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "I have something for you." He handed me a drawing, this one different from the others. It depicted our house bathed in sunlight, flowers blooming in the garden, and no figure in the attic window. Beneath the drawing were the words, "Peace." I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. "Thank you, Callum." As he ran off to play with Ellie, I looked up at the attic window. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly at ease. But deep down, I knew that peace could be fragile, and sometimes the past has a way of returning when you least expect it. The days following the neighborhood cleansing were filled with a cautious optimism. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere that had once clung to our homes seemed to have dissipated. Children played outside without fear, and neighbors greeted each other with genuine smiles. It was as if a collective weight had been lifted from our shoulders. However, beneath the surface, a lingering unease remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, waiting. The silence felt too complete, too artificial. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Ellie approached me with a drawing in her hand. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Mom," she said softly, "Callum gave me this today." I took the paper from her and unfolded it. It was our house again, meticulously drawn with crayon, but this time the attic window was different. Instead of a figure, there was a swirling mass of darkness, as if the crayon had been pressed harder, the strokes more frantic. Beneath the drawing were the words, "He's changing." A chill ran down my spine. I looked at Ellie, who was watching me intently. "Did Callum say anything else?" I asked. She nodded. "He said the man isn't the same anymore. He's angrier." That night, I found it difficult to sleep. The house was silent, but every creak and groan felt amplified. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of the drawing and Callum's ominous words. Around midnight, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the attic. I held my breath, straining to listen. The scratching continued, rhythmic and deliberate. I nudged Mark awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. He listened for a moment before nodding. "It's probably just a mouse or something." But I wasn't convinced. The sound was too deliberate, too intentional. The next morning I decided to investigate. I climbed the ladder to the attic, flashlight in hand. The space was as we had left it, dusty boxes, old furniture, and cobwebs. But in the corner, near the window, I noticed something new. There were deep scratch marks on the wooden floor, as if someone or something had been clawing at it. The marks were fresh, the wood splintered and raw. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. I needed answers. I reached out to Father Andrew once more. He arrived later that day, his expression grave as I showed him the drawing and the scratch marks. "This is concerning," he said. "It seems the presence hasn't left. If anything, it's growing stronger." He suggested another cleansing, this time focusing solely on our house. That evening, he performed the ritual, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water in every room. The atmosphere felt tense, the air thick with anticipation. As he concluded the ceremony, a loud bang echoed from the attic. We rushed upstairs, but the space was empty. The scratch marks, however, had multiplied, covering the floor in chaotic patterns. Father Andrew looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "This entity is feeding on fear. We need to remain strong." In the days that followed, the disturbances escalated. Lights flickered, objects moved on their own, and the oppressive feeling returned with a vengeance. Ellie began having nightmares, waking up screaming about the man in the attic. One night, I awoke to find her standing at the foot of our bed, her eyes wide with terror. "He's here," she whispered. "He's in the house." I jumped out of bed and checked every room, but there was no sign of an intruder. Still, the feeling of being watched was undeniable. Desperate for a solution, I began researching the history of our home. I discovered that before Thomas, the house had been owned by a man named Harold, who had mysteriously disappeared. Neighbors at the time spoke of strange occurrences and a sense of dread that permeated the property. It seemed our home had a long history of darkness. Determined to protect my family, I decided to confront the entity directly. That night, I climbed into the attic alone, flashlight in hand. "Whoever you are," I said aloud, "you are not welcome here. This is our home now, and we will not live in fear." The air grew colder, and a low growl echoed through the space. I stood my ground, repeating the words until the growling ceased. As I descended the ladder, I felt a sense of resolve. I would not let this entity control our lives. The following morning, Ellie handed me another drawing. This one depicted our family standing together, holding hands with the house in the background. The attic window was empty. Beneath the drawing were the words, "He knows you're not afraid." I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. Perhaps by facing our fear, we had weakened the entity's hold. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over. The darkness still lingered, waiting for an opportunity to return. We really have no idea what is going on, but I'll come back here and post if anything else happens. Please pray for us.